Open the meeting, and based on time constraints with some folks, we'll start with the item for discussed plan wastewater update to selectmen 10/22/19.
So, I was printing out a bunch of things and then bring it with me. So I'll go off memory here. So on the 22nd, the selectmen had requested some specifics. And what I had asked Dave Young to do was to write a memo in that regard on some specific questions regarding design of the plant, how they calculated an estimated cost for various things and for flows. So he has that memo, and so that update would be addressing that memo. And that would kind of be Dave Young's. That's one of them, yeah. So part of the meeting would be Dave Young presenting that memo and updating the board on those specific things that they had requested. But in my mind, and in talking with Kurt, we also contemplated or thought that you only get so many opportunities, and we're on a tight schedule, so we probably ought to present additional information as well. We're trying to keep it all relatively summarized, and I have a relatively good opening that I've spoken to Kurt about as far as the timing, and the time is now to do this type of thing. But we also felt it'd be good instead of just me presenting something, instead of just Kurt presenting something, and instead of Dave just presenting something, if we had more participation from the wastewater advisory or water resource advisory committee. And so looking for a couple people that might be willing to work with, I work with you to hone our presentation for that date. So we have a complete update to the Board of Selectmen, and perhaps start touching on some of these recommendations that we'll talk about as well. So that's kind of what we're looking for, is we've got that update to the selectmen, and it's a chance to get in front of them and let them know where we stand and give them some information. So, and keep in mind, I'm jumping around a little bit, but on some of the key dates, I kind of worked back, and I think I had put this in an email to everybody, but if I hadn't, I'll make sure I do. But basically, I'm looking in January of 2020. It's kind of a drop dead date for the Board of Selectmen to vote on participation in DHY. And so,
Get date again?
January of 2020. Which I don't
Just
know.
a general January.
I don't know what the dates meetings are yet. Probably that first meeting in January, which means on December 17th they have a meeting scheduled, and that looks like to be the best date for a final DHY discussion, which would line them up for a vote in January. And so, working back from that, we've got this October 22nd opportunity to update them. And then between October 22nd and December 17th, we're going to have to work with the DHY group to do some face-to-face meeting with the other communities. And I'll probably try to line them up one-on-one to give them information that they need as well. And so this 10/22 kind of is our, I wouldn't say it's our last, but you only have so many bites at the apple. They only have so many meetings scheduled. And the holidays tend to get in the way as well. So so the 22nd is what we're focusing on now. And just a reminder, October 21st is a Monday, and that's our public information session at the Senior Center. So all that being said, any volunteers?
Just getting back to the regional agreement, how does it look for Howard? Have they decided for sure not to have the special town meeting this fall?
They don't have a special town
They
meeting.
don't, so.
Everybody is geared up to go in May of 2020.
Okay.
So the update on that is very well could be by the 22nd that bill will be signed. As we understand it now, the Senate has passed the bill and it's sitting on the governor's desk for approval.
Okay.
And so we're it's one step away from having an actual document that makes it all real.
Sure.
And so the timing is good leading up to the 22nd.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, just all three towns, because if they had held a town meeting and the other two who are, by the time you would have had to print your warrants and put articles in and this and that, no one knew where the legislation would be.
Mhm.
So it was agreed that everyone, because there was an agreement that all three towns would go at the same time, that no one was going to go forward with it this fall, and they'll go forward next May in 2020. So
Good.
Since that time, as Rich just said, last Thursday, the bill was enacted both by the Senate and the House, and that bill is now sitting on the governor's desk. They're expecting his signature any day.
Very good. All systems go? Hopefully.
Yeah, there were no changes in the Senate side. Their counsel had suggested a couple word edits, but they weren't even enacted. So it went through as passed by the House.
Any questions for David at this point?
So on the 22nd, basically, it's going to be following up with Dave's memo on the information they wanted on design elements and cost estimates and flow estimates and how that was all done. An update as to the status of DHY. And I'm contemplating, we have a discussion point here about you have a recommendation related to DHY. So I'm assuming that we'll be talking about that in our other recommendations to them. And I am contemplating and on the agenda something along the lines of an update as to public outreach and responses that we've gotten, supportive, not supportive, what the issues may or may not be. And perhaps pending Lou's discussion tonight, what that might look like. So those are kind of the elements of the October 22nd. And so at this point, again, as looking for a couple volunteers that I can work with to put that together. Again, Kurt just felt that it'd be better if it came from, more representative of the committee as opposed to just me or just Dave or just himself. So,
Yeah.
so I guess what we're looking for on this agenda item is anyone that wants to volunteer, or if you have any suggestions or feel strongly about the agenda, something that ought or ought not be included on it. Now's your time to let me know, because I gotta get this together probably this week.
And when will you have that ready? The remarks?
Hoping to have it ready this week.
Okay, let me know and I'll take a look.
I'll be more than happy to volunteer.
Okay.
I will as well. Good boy, John.
Very good. Oops.
Just one. There was an article in the paper recently, Rich, about the selectmen were commenting about the fact that they wanted to see more outreach, but more public information. And there was a while ago, we had this discussion about putting these flyers in the quarterly water reports, or the bills, quarterly bills. And we haven't done it so far. And I'm just curious as to why we haven't proceeded on that. I mean, I just got my water bill and there was nothing in it but the bill.
So in the interest of time, so we have a couple people, maybe we can take that up under number 2. But we
Okay.
can definitely do that. But let me just save it to you.
It's just that it sounded to me like the selectmen were, they were anxious to get more public involvement on this thing. And
I guess, just to light up what number 2 might look like, I guess my comments on that is, what do they want us to communicate? And that's kind of, to me, that's been the issue, right? So we can send them all kinds of things as many times as they want, but do you want to have a unified message that everyone's on board with, or do you want to just send out your opinions that might end up being something different down the line? So that's why I said, we do have a discussion around that. We can definitely do that stuff, but that discussion is, what is it that you want to send out?
Yeah, I think it's a sequential thing. One, you started taking some recommendation votes at the last meeting. There's some others to be discussed here tonight. So once you've got your recommendations, you put those in front of the selectmen on the 22nd. Once you get their sense of where they're leaning, then you can put the stuff out in front of the folks until you get
little bit
build
more.
up momentum and recommendations coming out of 2 different groups, to put out to the public. You don't know what's behind you.
And you guys,
what you're standing on.
you guys have the, you're involved, so you kind of get it. But from my perspective, I'd like to, before we send something out, I'd like to see a little bit of consensus on a subject, right? So in other words, if the RAC decides to send something out to 15,000 households and is diametrically opposed to what people on the Board of Selectmen want to support, are we doing ourselves a favor, or are we shooting ourselves in the foot? So that's what we kind of need to line up.
I don't know. It just seems to me that, okay, fine, you don't want to send some specific information because there hasn't been a decision, but we're just keep kicking this football down the can down the street or whatever. And we've had this discussion before, and we've put out a number of really nice flyers that you put together. And I just think, even if we just get general information on there, explaining to the public, what are the critical issues, especially environment. We know cost is a big issue, and if we had lots of money, there wouldn't be an issue. We'd be digging that trench tomorrow.
So that's kind of what's contemplated under item number 2 here. So let's keep that on the agenda and write down some of the things you might want to send out. The other part of this is it's number 3, is this will be our 3rd general public information session. And so having completed that, the timing might be perfect for exactly what you're saying, but we can talk about what that looks like.
On the general information discussions, they've been really great. We've had these forums, public forums, but we're only hitting a very small segment of the entire community. And the way I see it, we can have all these little forums, but if people don't want to show up, but if they get it in the mail, they can't say, "Oh, we never heard of this."
Maybe just a complete item 4, the cost memo that Richard sent us several questions. So we tried to put in this cost memo, answers to all those questions.
It's in the packet. It looks like this.
It should be in the handout packet that you received tonight. So it explains the cost and how they were generated, and it explains the cost going forward for the Yarmouth only option, if you were to stay and just do it all on your own, the wastewater program, or if you were to join the DHY Clean Waters Community Partnership. And then we walked through, the status of what the collection systems look like, meaning the sewer system, conveyance, meaning pumping stations, force mains, the treatment plant, whether it's your own or the DHY, then where effluent recharge would be, and then some of the other sort of non-traditional things, similar to what you recently started, being the Parkers River Bridge and the increased flushing there. So the pages that follow that just explain, how the costs were generated and what the status is, where they came from, how updates have been done over the years, why certain like treatment plants have been selected for the processes at this point, and all those things. So we'd welcome any comments that you have on it. But as indicated earlier, one of the key aspects is task 4 in here, or section 4, which is the cost summary. And it goes through again how costs are shared or proposed to be shared in the DHY versus if you did it on your own. And then shows you some tables that I believe you've all seen previously, which shows the phase 1 costs, whether it's you do it on your own or with DHY, or then the total program costs, meaning the build out, 8 phases, 40 years out, what that looks like. Now these costs are all in year 2022 cost projections. And hopefully, Rich is going to send this on to the selectmen. And so they'll have this well in advance of their meeting, or that meeting update on the 22nd. So we'll review it, but we'll be able to answer questions that they may have at that time. So we welcome any input that you have prior to, you think something's not clear, or still a question that's hanging out there that we didn't answer. Feel free to pass it along to Rich, and we'll get it taken care of.
So my plan was to send this out tomorrow to the selectmen so they have it, but gives us an opportunity, if you do have specific comments, we'll revise it for the packet that goes out to them for this meeting.
Well, if I might, I went to the September 24th Board of Selectmen meeting and listened to the discussion about the project. It was clear to me that there were 2 points that most of the members of the board were hung up on. One was the contribution financially of the town of Yarmouth versus the contribution of output to the treatment plant. There was some back and forth dialogue. I think you heard it all, Rich, that, was Yarmouth paying the appropriate fair share? It was almost reminiscent of some discussions which I haven't participated in around the school. Is it the right formula? And it seemed that even the slightest variance between, what our contribution would be versus what our cost would be. So I saw that as an area that's going to need, if nothing else, explanation, and maybe in great detail. And then the second thing which surprised me, because I'm not a golfer, but the amount of time that was spent worrying about the golf course, it was. I don't know the numbers in terms of what town is spending to run the golf course, but it was pretty obvious that, it was a very special entity, and to upset the golf course in any way, shape, or form was going to be a big deal. I'm not perfect at reading tea leaves, but those were 2 that were out there that we're going to have to somehow be prepared to deal with.
To your first comment, and Dave, maybe if you could explain this. I have a high level understanding of it and I think might be useful, and correct me if I'm wrong. But there's a 2-phase approach here, right? And so phase 1, where we're contributing, might be different. We're in the agreement where Selectman Holcomb was the one having the comment, where we have 55% contribution. It's really a 2-phase or 2-pronged calculation. The first one is based on actual contribution in the first phase, and then you get another bite at the apple to self-correct 4 phases later in 20 years, based on what's actually occurring after that happens. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, the agreement itself, which is sort of the operating rules for how you would run the district. How the cost sharing works is it's based on the percent ownership that each community would have in the treatment facility and effluent recharge facilities. So what we're showing now are 2, actually there's 3 different means in the agreement, but the build out number is based off percent ownerships, and it's 55% for Yarmouth right now, 15% for Harwich, and 30% for Dennis. And that's based on the most recent numbers. Now, I heard some give and take from 1 or 2 of the selectmen of, well, the numbers keep changing. Well, that's because back 6 months, a year ago, it was Yarmouth had 53%. And then Dennis went up after they had their economic study done, and they requested another 200,000. Well, Yarmouth's share dropped to 52%. And then most recently, Yarmouth has requested to increase their flow by 280,000 gallons. Well, that you brought up to 55%. So we're all talking 3% ultimately out there. But the bottom line is, don't worry about that number, because it comes down to the second case that we put in there as an example, to try to put the first 4 phases of cost out there. We said, all right, we added up the flows from each community for the next 4 phases in that community. And we designed the treatment plant, costed that out for that, and it was just about the same percentages as at build out, which they're trying to keep those anyway. So we left it at those percent numbers. Whether Yarmouth wants to stay at that flow number or come in 500,000 gallons less than that number, that's ultimately up to when the district is formed and the commissioners ask, all right, Yarmouth, how much flow do you want for ownership in there? instead of doing the first 4 phases, maybe all 3 towns say, well, we only want to build for the first 3 phases. And then 3 phases out, we do that. And then ultimately at the end, there's no magic as to building the treatment plant in 2 phases. The process that's been selected has been selected because it's flexible in terms of how you expand the treatment plant. So it's not directly proportion in terms of cost either to the flow numbers, because you've got to build buildings for administration and labs and room for equipment and those things. The flow proportion is more in the tankage itself for where the process actually goes forward. But so we did an example in the middle of the first 4 phases and then build out. And we said, all right, so after that phase, those first 4 phases are built, and one of the communities is more aggressive in their sewer program or expanding it. So one of them says, all right, one of them needs 500,000 gallons, and the other 2 each request 250,000 gallons. So you do a 1 million gallon a day expansion. Well, that would be 50% for that one community paying for the expansion, 25% for the other community paying for that expansion, and 25% for the third community. And then once it's all built, you look at the aggregate percent ownership again back in the treatment plant, and that's how they would start paying their share again. Because it's all based on how much percent ownership you have in the plant at any given time.
And so the bottom line is, for illustrative purposes, you put 55% because that's the number we're all accustomed to talking to at build out.
Right.
But the reality is when you go to build a plant, it is what it is, and you pay based on what it actually is, or you all agreed to at that time.
And then the operating cost, there's 2 components to the operating cost. There's a fixed cost component, which you pay based on your percent ownership. And there's a flow variable cost component. And that's based on how much flow you're sending to the treatment plant. So if you're sending 0 gallons, you wouldn't pay that portion of the operating cost, but you would pay the fixed cost.
And I guess all this is a way of saying for the 22nd meeting, the 3 of you that volunteered that I want to work with is, this is kind of what I want to talk to you about. And what I'd hope to get across is a lot of times our board of selectmen and others that have to make decisions are used to having concrete answers right in front of them. A project of this magnitude and complexity, you're not going to have that. There's uncertainty, and hopefully you do as much as you can to mitigate that uncertainty, but it's not going to be exactly 55% when we build our plant. It might be 54.8 or something, but you don't know. So just like we don't know what our costs are going to be perfectly because they shift with every decision you make and when the timings of those decisions. We don't know how we're going to fund it exactly, but we have a plan. And I guess that's what we got to push forward. So we can't address every single specific concern you might have because they're just unknowns. And that's what's going to happen in this type of project. But we have a plan to address them. And that's what the agreement provides. And that's what our funding plan provides for. And what do we have to back that up if some of these things don't come through? And that's the best you can do.
What I heard when I heard Mr. Holcomb specifically, but maybe some of the other members as well of the board, is that they felt as though because we have the largest percentage, that somehow we should have more votes when it comes to making decisions on how to operate the plant. Which, this takes us back to situations they're talking about with the school and stuff like that. And it just seems like we're just, going around in circles because ultimately we have a number of votes, but it's not one town that's going to control it. If they want to control it, then we should build our own plant. I'm not advocating for that because I think that's the worst mistake worst decision we could ever make, given the fact that we would lose out on all kinds of benefits that we would have if we're in a regional approach. I understand where they're coming from, but it is very frustrating because the way it's structured. Now, answer this. In the Mansfield-Norton deal, they have the same voting structure, right? It's based on a percentage of the number of people on the board,
Yeah,
representative of each town.
right. And Mansfield, which has over 50% of the flow, they have 3 commissioners, and each of the other 2 have 2. Just to refresh everyone's memory here, there was a lot of discussion at the subgroup level, and then it was brought back to each community's subgroup beyond that. And all 3 towns had agreed to the current proposal at the time, back last spring. But originally it was 2-2-1, meaning 2 for Yarmouth, 2 for Dennis, and 1 for Harwich. And then last spring, after some further discussions, there was the thought that, well, 1 vote really, what did that give Harwich and this and that? And it was actually proposed by some folks in Dennis to say, why don't you make it 2-2-3 and give Yarmouth an additional vote? That was brought back to all the different subgroups and then the DHY subgroup that meets monthly. And they all felt that that was a very fair compromise. And up until last week, I thought all 3 towns had agreed to that concept.
We all did. So you mean we lost that?
No, we didn't lose it.
One person's vote.
It's just that they're questioning, our Board of Selectmen is questioning the wisdom of that.
Well, a lot of times the formula, the answer is self-evident. You just need time to catch up to it. I think in this one particular selectman's case, he just needs time to catch up to it. This is a very well thought out structure for the board. Anyone who's served on multi-town and regional committees knows you have to balance the number of votes against tie votes against overweighted votes. And having served on the assembly, you can easily appreciate that.
And there's
Normal
some-
come around. The structure of this is fine. I think he has to rely on professional staff to sign off on stuff like that. And that's what the town administrators, one of his roles is to say, look, we're looking out for the interest of the town. This is an appropriate and probably the best way to go. So let them explain it. I don't think that falls back. I don't see us analyzing the DHY legislation or proposal or contract and making recommendations specifically on any item that the selectmen have a question on. I think we're gonna get stuck doing this for months, if not years, if we do. So to the degree that you might be the only guy in the room who doesn't get it, they'll catch up. Let's move on. Let's get to the next thing.
And there were also suggestions about the makeup of the board that kind of along Norm Holcomb's argument that those other towns don't want us to have a supermajority going into the meeting every time either. So there's the other side of the balance is that if you were absolute about the vote per percent, we just walk in there, take our vote as the town of Yarmouth, and nobody would have any other say. And obviously, as partners, they don't want that either. So
I think
there was some discussion in the past about even that.
I think Lee hit the nail on the head, right? If that's what you want, build your own plant and invite us then to join you later, right? As
Yeah.
a minority interest in the plant. But that's not what we've
That
done.
may
so.
be one of the outcomes to consider, but not because of the structure of the board.
Right.
So let's let the administrators work out that piece of it while we look at the rest.
So I think
We'll
that's,
see if the same subject comes up at the next meeting.
Like I said, I think the selectmen are, in this particular case, one selectman, but in other issues, more than one selectman haven't caught up to the issue. And they're not catching up to it. The golf course conversation, the land adjacent to the Buck Island Road question, these all detract from the core issues that we're trying to wrestle with. And to the degree that's all the time they're spending on it, they're not going to get to the core issue. So I would suggest the staff and the town administrators work on getting them up to speed on those kinds of issues.
the DHY group meets on the 18th.
Mhm.
And so I'm sure we'll have some level of discussion that we can update everybody on before we go into the 22nd on some of those issues. So I think that's number 4, Mr. Acting Chairman.
Can I just make a comment, Mr. Chairman?
Behind you.
Here's the chairman.
Kathy has a comment.
Sorry, he was chairing while you were
He
here.
can still share, it's fine. Give him some practice.
Kathy behind you.
Kathy has a comment.
Dave just mentions in his memo, the memo that Karen and I prepared, are you gonna attach that? Because I think one of the things that the board of selectmen is very interested in is how do we come up with those flow projections and what's the total numbers? And they're gonna want to see that presented, I think, in the presentation on the 22nd as well. And the golf course was a very interesting conversation. I think one of the things that they wanted to be sure was that the costs took into consideration, restoration, loss of revenue, how we were taking care of our employees if they were going to be closing for a season. So I don't know whether your estimates take any of those particular
Does.
things into consideration.
There is some estimates, and Dave can speak to that. But again, we're not going to have every I dotted and T crossed. There's a leap of faith at some level that,
It will be mentioned
You know,
as my only comment.
once you get to
though I
that-
didn't have an answer.
right, once you get to that project, then you gotta, go through that due diligence you just talked about. What about lost revenue? What about employees and holding them over, things like that? So yeah, of course that would be part of it, but are we gonna plan out every eventuality now for something that we don't even know we're gonna move forward with,
I
right?
think it's a matter of some reassurance that will be taken into consideration and evenly shared amongst the groups as the effluent recharge. Should be something that was kind of discussed, I thought, at that meeting.
Did you want to say
One-
something?
Yes.
Good. You want to say something before we go?
Pass these down, please.
You got a couple minutes to say something?
You want to say something? Rich?
No.
I have a concern, and I've expressed it in some ways before, but as we look at the presentation to the Board of Selectmen, we talk about the planning efforts to reduce the nitrogen from our water. And the reasons we give for the necessity of reducing the nitrogen is algae blooms are definitely unhealthy, that it may pollute the water and we won't have swimming down here. There won't be a recreational activity available. Too much nitrogen in the water kills the fish. Nobody wants that. Eelgrass loss, it's like the canary in the mine shaft. If you have eelgrass, you have a healthy body of water. If you don't have eelgrass, you really have the opposite. Now, I have a major concern about the health issues in regard to drinking water. And I've distributed a piece of paper which first of all talks about the fact, I don't think any of us can argue about the fact that a septic system discharge is the most impactful concern for water quality. Certainly. We're all aware, I think, that 85% of the Cape residents use a nitrogen discharging home septic system. Now, if anybody has any contradictions to this in regard to engineering or whatever that will ease my concerns, I would certainly appreciate hearing it. We know that the septic systems do not remove the contaminants of emerging concern, and we know that our scientific investigations to date have discovered innumerable contaminants of emerging concern. The Cape is unique in the fact that it's a sandbar. It's the outflow from the past glacier, and it's composed of sand and gravel. And it is most permeable. In fact, so permeable that groundwater can travel 1 foot in 1 day on the Cape, as opposed to, say, traveling 1 foot in 1 year in the area around Worcester, Massachusetts, because around Worcester, Massachusetts, you have clay and peat in the soil. On the Cape, you have none. When we flush the toilet, the discharge liquids go into our groundwater. Barnstable's experiencing drinking water problems we know about Otis. Think about the permeability of our soil and the idea of 1 foot in one day, the groundwater traveling. It's concerning. The PFAS, they're called PFAS. And I'm not sure that I can pronounce this, but a lot of people probably can. The fluorofluorinated chemicals. They do definitely impact human health. And I'll go into how they specifically negatively impact the human health. We're looking at sea level rise within the next 30 to 50 years, and it'll either be 6 inches or it'll be 2 feet. Nobody is quite sure, but it will rise. There's no doubt about it. With the warming of our planet, the seas will definitely rise. So the septic system infusion of groundwater contaminates the well water, and the groundwater is intruded by the salt water. So those, I believe, are facts. That's what I think is a basic statement. Now, there are considerations that we should have in regard to the health crisis regarding drinking water. The antibiotics that we find in our drinking water are used in the treatment of urinary infections, pneumonia, as well as the chemicals of emerging concern, which have been detected in our drinking. The levels of these two substances, the antibiotics and the PFAS, are among the highest reported in the United States. Those are the reports from Cape Cod. And this is done by the EPA. Now, the chemicals of emerging concern detected in our drinking water affect the thyroid, the mammary glands, cholesterol metabolism, immune system, child development, and incidence of cancer. The EPA currently regulates 90 chemicals in drinking water. And Jeff, I think, is more than aware of this. However, the current Washington administration is currently weakening the regulations in the 1972 Clean Water Act, which causes concern. Now, I propose 2 solutions. One solution is wastewater infrastructure. We gotta have sewers. We have sewers, we can clear up the health crisis in drinking water. The other thing is that we can go to bottled water. The only problem with bottled water is a bottled water called Dasani, which is run by Coca-Cola, and Aquafina, which is run by Pepsi. Both use municipal water systems for their water. They turn on great big taps and runs through some kind of a small filter thing. And they put it in a plastic bottle and they screw the top on. They sell it to you for approximately $1.79 wholesale. Poland Springs, which is run by Nestle's, doesn't use springs. I was on just an aside, I was up to southern New Hampshire, middle New Hampshire, on a graduate research grant and program 50 years ago, and I visited Poland Springs. And I was interested in how they did their water. I was fascinated. I went into this building and there were these white plastic bottles that were just moving around, and tons of water coming down. So we asked to see the springs. Well, 50 years ago, they weren't. They had already completely wiped out the springs. So they started buying municipal water from the next neighboring town. And then they figured that's not a very good way to, promote your product. people could get concerned about that, so they blasted wells. There's no water no spring water, per se, in Poland Springs water. And Nestle's is being sued right now for false advertising. If we go to bottled water, the average person drinks 58 gallons of water a year. And the population in Yarmouth is 23,339, roughly. Now, if we don't have any water that we can use from the tap, we have to use water in some form. And it seems places like Flint, Michigan, and other places have always used bottled water. Now, I would imagine that if our municipal water supply goes down the tubes, our governmental administration will provide water for us in the form of bottled water. And if they do, the 23,339 people drinking 58 gallons of water comes to 1,354,000 gallons of water a year that the town of Yarmouth would have to buy to keep us healthy. The municipal tap water costs $0.0015, less than a penny. Less than a penny a gallon is what we pay for our tap water. Now, if we do the arithmetic here, if you're going to pay for the bottled water, and you're going to compare it to the town water, the bottled water runs at $1.78 a gallon, and the water from the municipal department is less than a penny. The town would save $2,407,000 if we put in sewers. Now, Dave, that's something that you could put in your presentation to the Board of Selectmen. They'd love to save money, I'm sure, as do all the residents. Thank you. Anybody have any comments to help me get less concerned?
Well, since we're about to ban bottled water.
Yeah, I was just going to say, there's a petition ballot to put it.
I think Nestle's will just put it in tin cups and sell it to
Well,
us that way.
I think the selectmen may be aware of some of the problems. To me, I think the biggest hangup is cost and who controls the situation here. But Jeff, isn't it true that we have 22 high production wells? right now?
24.
24.
Yes.
And we have 3 of them shut down.
No, we only have one that's shut down.
Okay. I thought we had 3.
No, we have others that are affected by nitrogen,
Mhm.
but they're not completely shut down. We use them sparingly and also blend them with other sources. There might be, so that's generally how we work the system.
So,
I don't mean to interrupt, but can we both go back and forth here?
sure. I just want to,
Tag
what,
team.
what's the value of creating a high production well these days? What's it worth?
Well, we haven't done that in an awful long time, but it would be multiple millions of dollars for one well development.
Okay. And if we keep going along the same track and we keep sending nitrogen into the ground, the probability that we're going to lose another high production well here or there, or just the fact that you're now blending, and maybe people should know that they're drinking their own nitrogen. You
Why
know?
can't we say that? Why are we talking about cost all the time rather than the health of the community?
Right.
I think there's something more important than the cost.
Because people would rather die than pay their money.
Not I, but I think you're right.
That's why we keep
It
having
is
these
a real
Oh, and
problems.
listen, I have a present for some of the people. I have 5 here. BJ's is interested in testing your water. Now, don't test your municipal water because there's no need to. Jeff does that. I know it's going to be, it is fine and will be for a long time. But if you want to test your Poland Springs, your Denizani, or your Aqua, it's right here. And BJ's will pay for it. Thank you.
So to round up that topic, number 4, I'll include your comments and concerns in our presentation for the 22nd, Tom.
As long as the drinking water is emphasized as a health serious concern in the town of Yarmouth. And if you agree, I don't want to put anything in there that is not in agreement with this group.
I would just like to say that Yarmouth has great taste in water, great water.
It's all.
I go to my kid's house in Oakdale.
The nitrogen is very special.
You can smell the chlorine before you cook.
Yeah.
It's great water.
Yeah, the other thing people need to remember is everything we're doing has nothing to do with drinking water. All these plans are based on the estuary study. So when, we need to be talking more about the drinking water issue, but we're not.
And I don't know why we're not.
Nobody's suing us. Can we move on?
You're not interested in the drinking water problem?
I think if you have a public meeting and an agenda, you should probably stick to it and
Stick to what?
work through it, the agenda, so we can get folks who are here to participate, presenting and participating, as opposed to just waiting for the clock to run out.
Tom, just to close that loop, it's probably before a lot of the people in this room's time getting into the wastewater program, but back in 2011, 2012-ish, somewhere around there, we actually did a report for the town where we modeled the pumping of all 24 wells at their capacity that they're rated for, to see what the impacts of nitrogen going into the zones of contribution, meaning where the water comes from into that well. And the result was that the 3 wells that you're seeing impacts on today and you've been seeing for over the last 30 years were the only 3 that were really going to be impacted, because you've done a really excellent job of protecting those wells, which tend to be along the Route 6 corridor. And that's where your least dense development is, except for the 3 that are near the Captain's Village area, which is one of your highest density areas. So you can't really go and say all the drinking water wells are going to be impacted by nitrogen. Other issues are coming up. Wholeheartedly agree, PFAS and all the other things are, something new about that comes up every day. So I'm only speaking to the nitrogen issue when I make those statements, but only those 3 were the ones identified to be impacted. And that's when the town started managing and minimizing their use and blending and doing other things. Because you're very fortunate. You have 24 wells. Most communities have 4 or 5 wells.
My concern is not for the immediate time. And excuse me, Spiro, for still going. I don't mean to bother you. I picture this huge wave after a 2-foot increase in sea level coming in at Seagull Beach and Radio City, going up South Sea Avenue, the groundwater rising beyond the level of the septic systems, that groundwater mixing with the contamination from the septic systems, moving under 28 and continuing all the way up to Route 6 and impacting negatively the wells from which we draw our water.
So, Mr. Chairman, we skipped ahead to number 4 to get people in before they had to leave. CDM has to leave, Tom has to leave, and queued up number 1 here for Lou.
I guess it's all yours then.
Oh, thank you. First of all, I want to thank you, Mr. Chairman and members, for allowing me to make a presentation on an article that the selectmen is proposing at my request I've been in business and lived in Yarmouth for a good many years, and I've been working with the town on zoning and trying to see good economic development along 28 to help in job creation and stability, and trying to get the business community back and participating to a greater proportion in our tax sharing than they are now. When I first opened the business with my father 58 years ago, the business community represented 25% of the tax rate. We're now less than 7%, and it's for many reasons. I've been working with a team of people since the town rezoned the 4 areas overlay from Forest Road up to Great Island, Winslow Gray. And we've been trying to attract interested investors to bring back some economy, and we've had a difficult time. And we've explored different things in different ways. So my goal as a property owner and as a resident is to help in the effort of getting sewer for the town of Yarmouth. For all the reasons stated, I won't repeat. They're all valid and true of what we need in this town. We should have done it years ago. The longer we wait, the more it's going to cost. So I have, as a property owner, been trying to explore different ways in which we can help contribute towards creating a sewer system. And I like Chris Bailey, who is my associate, been working with me for about 4 years, reaching out around the country to attract investors to come to Yarmouth to help me in creating the vision that I had projected with the town when they rezoned. So I'd like him to explain the financing mechanism that we've been working with the town on that would be a component and a help, we think, in getting the town residents to recognize that we need to make this investment, and this is one way we can help. So this is a financing district. I am not in any way wanting to conflict with your work and the town's work. My goal is to help you in both educating the townspeople as a critical need to create sewer, and a way in which we can help finance it through the business community and through investment. And so I'd like Chris Bailey to explain the district and why I'm seeking a passage early this spring at the special town meeting, so we can work between the fall town meeting and the spring town meeting to ascertain how much the business community in the area that we've outlined will be contributing to help pay for the sewer. Chris?
Thanks. So, hi, my name is Chris Bailey. I live on the Cape. I'm a development consultant and commercial broker. And I've been working with Lou for several years, and we've been trying to figure out how to redevelop his property in order to enhance the all year round capacity for attracting people to the area and to his property. So the first thing that we did a few years ago was I spent quite a bit of time working with some investors and developers from different parts of the country, looking at hotels and mixed use residential, retail, maybe a little office component to it, and came up with some concept plans for how to do that. And found some very qualified folks that were interested in investing and participating in the development of the site. After a little while, the next question was, so where's your sewer? And that was a full stop in that conversation. This is not just one developer, this is multiple developers, this is basically the entire industry looking at the financial feasibility of developing that property, of redeveloping that property. The 25 acres that Lou has, which is certainly a very substantial opportunity for economic development and redevelopment here in Yarmouth. So basically what we concluded was that there wasn't too much point in continuing those conversations in any real way, except to try to keep those people in the loop and keep them interested in talking to me about that property, so that when we solve that problem, when we answer that question, they'll be ready to come back. And I think that I'm doing that, keeping those burners warm. I've got a hotel developer out of North Carolina, for example. I I've got a financier, banker, investor, developer out of upstate New York, for example. Those are people that are specifically interested in coming here and helping us, partnering with us to redevelop that property. The concept, by the way, if anybody hasn't heard this already, the concept is to keep the mini golf, to keep the landmark there, and to build around that, and to use that as an attraction and as a theme, and to bring in a mixed-use development that would most likely include a resort hotel, and probably some residential multifamily in the back of the property. But to have some retail and restaurants and so on around the mini golf in the front. So we kind of put that on the back burner for the time being and said, okay, if we're going to develop, what we first need to figure out is how to acquire sewer for this spot. And as has been Lou's cause for a long time, and something that I've worked on in other towns, I was on the Economic Development Corporation board in Bourne, that is now doing their project in Buzzards Bay. I helped form the Economic Development Corporation in Sandwich that's currently looking at a public-private partnership project there. So that's something that Lou and I have seen eye to eye about from the beginning, that there is a lot of logic to high tide lifts all boats, and let's figure out how to work with the community to do something that'll benefit not just this property, but the properties around it. Because ultimately, if we're going to attract people to the area, we want to attract people to more than just Lou's property. That'll benefit all of us, and particularly my client, Lou's property, more effectively if we can create a capacity, sewer capacity for the neighboring properties as well. So we discussed public-private partnership. We've had quite a number of discussions about that with the staff members that are here in the past, and ultimately, public-private partnership has proven to be a really tough nut to crack. Very complicated way of doing this, and probably ultimately doesn't fit terribly well with the DHY plan. And so then more recently, we've adopted this DIF program, which is in your packets that you have. And we also have a little bit of this here. So I'll just, if you could pass those around, because it's a one-page summary of the concept of a DIF. Basically, the idea is that a district improvement financing is a funding mechanism that allows for the increased revenue coming from redeveloped properties that are redeveloped as a result of having the access to sewer, like Lou's property. The increased assessed value is then used to pay for the sewer that it allowed to happen. That's the basic concept. And so there's a financial example there that explains that if you've got a property that is currently assessed for $1 million, I just use very round numbers to make it easy to show the concept. And then that property is redeveloped because it's going to have sewer. It can be redeveloped, whereas previously it couldn't be. That property now has an assessed value of $10 million. Then the additional $9 million in assessed value, whatever the tax value is on that, I can't remember, but it says it on the sheet. That additional value gets sent to pay for the bond, to pay the debt service on the bond that is issued to build the system. So this can work as part of the DHY funding mechanism. So it's really a financial tool. And ultimately, if for some reason the three towns don't decide to go forward with the DHY system, this could potentially be used to create a different system. Once the funding has been arranged for this, not a bond issued, but just the developers, the property owners have agreed to how they would redevelop their property and what the resulting raised assessment would be on that, then that mechanism could be used for whatever infrastructure the town winds up building. And so we're looking forward to moving forward with that. We've got approval from the selectmen to put this onto the town meeting warrant at the end of this month. But what's going to town meeting in October is that map that you see there. And that map simply defines the district where the diff would apply. So that those property owners within that pink district would have the ability to make this calculation and contribute to the new system. We also have the opportunity zone in this area. It's a very much an overlapping shaded district that isn't actually shown on the map, but we are in the opportunity zone, as is most of this DIF district, if not all of it. And the opportunity zone funding mechanism is running out. The benefits of it, it's a federal program that provides significant tax benefits to investors who help to develop or redevelop properties within that opportunity zone. And those benefits are gradually declining between now and 2027. The program is already a couple years old. And so we're anxious to make a move here so that our investors will be able to take advantage of that, because ultimately that'll help us make our development more effective. So that's a nutshell of it. And Bob Harding is here from our team, who is an investment banker and would be very well qualified to discuss some of the specifics of the DIF mechanism, as Rich is also very educated on all
And
this.
Bob is also a resident and taxpayer in town of Yarmouth, a longtime friend of mine, and very qualified in understanding various financing mechanisms. All we're asking through this article is for the town to create this district. We're not talking sewer, it's a financing district only. We've identified this area because it's the one area the town has identified as their desire to see redeveloped through the effort of rezoning that some of you worked hard in creating with the 4 overlay zones. And the opportunity zone was designated by the town as the same area. So that's why we've identified that as the DIF area. It can later be expanded by the town if they desire. My consultant that I've hired to work on this, and he's done it in 6 different communities already, and he's working with us to affect this, and will be working with us after town meeting through next spring to affect that. We hope we'll be matching your effort of outreach to the community, explaining how this will not be a drain on their present tax rate, but in addition to helping to finance the system that the town ultimately decides to go with.
Lou, if you could, sorry to
Yes,
jump in, but you're not actually getting the diff with the vote in October, but what it is doing to you is defining a map. And I think it's important for you to communicate what that allows you then to do between now and May.
Yeah, and what I'll do from then, my consultants, our team, will then be meeting with all my neighbors in this DIF district, identifying their properties and where the opportunities they see will be for them if sewer is there, how they will develop the property that they own, and what that dollar value will be. Those who can't, for instance, like Captain Parkus, he's been spending thousands and thousands of that system, and you can still smell it. He'd be paying a betterment. He wouldn't be enlarging his property, although he did add to his property. He may be changing the configuration with his addition. So we will be identifying for the town and for all of you as to what that value from the present day value, once the plan is created, town will ascertain the present value of all that real estate in that plan. And then we will ascertain, if it's redeveloped, what the additional value will be and what the town can count on as new tax revenue that will help pay for the creation of the sewer that ultimately is approved by the town.
And when you have that, that goes into a final plan, which would be the vote in May, one of many votes in May. So basically what Lou's talking about is development agreements that
We
kind of
hope it will
lock
be-
down what that
Yeah,
investment's
we
gonna
hope
be.
it will be companion to what you ultimately are going to ask the town to vote on in May. It will be a companion article that will complement the town's effort, in one that the engineers can decide this is going to be another way in which we'll be paying for the sewer, because you do plan on bringing a sewer down Route 28 in front of all our properties under your plan. So this is another financing mechanism.
So Lou, what
Yes.
is the town's actual commitment here, other than agreeing to create this district?
Bob, do you want to,
Which question, I'm sorry?
what is the town's commitment other than creating the plan?
Other than nothing at all. In terms of commitment as far as the credit of the town, not at all. It's off balance sheet. So it's not-
Would the town be agreeing to commit all revenues received over and above the existing
Within
assessed
that
value?
geographical district, anything.
And they would be committing that,
Tax revenue.
Not now,
Not now.
not this town meeting, commit nothing.
no, but
But
Next-
ultimately, once you vote at town meeting to use the diff and implement that, be part of your mechanism on how you're gonna pay for the sewer. With, in that diff area, the increased taxes you'll be enjoying, part of that will be allocated to paying for the sewer. The other part goes in the general fund. So not all of it will be, whatever the town has decided to do, whatever the engineers come up with the cost. But that won't be until the spring, once we ascertain what the potential increased value will be if all the landowners will have to commit to that development if they go forward.
If I might,
Yes.
what would be the distinction between the width that you're talking about, this map, and all of phase one that we propose to put the, if you will, the trunk line?
No difference, other than this is a different mechanism for helping to pay for
So why would it, and Rich might want to chime in on this, the implications in terms of the revenue to the town of Yarmouth if we simply made the diff everything that's in phase one, i.e. the entire length of
it.
28.
Later on, you may want to do that, but
Well, why not now?
because my consultant,
he
I'm
doesn't
gonna
wanna
be doing the
commit to
work between now and spring on my nickel, not the town's, to ascertain where your revenue is. That's why I've already consulted
that.
my
He's
consultant.
lost it.
And my consultant has identified this area. So say in the spring, you decide to expand it.
Yeah.
Then the town on its nickel will ascertain the rest of 28. Now, east of Forest Road and west of Winslow Gray, there's not any major redevelopment that I could ascertain that's gonna help. The area that the town spent a lot of money and time on creating, the 4 overlay districts, is the major area where we have an opportunity to redevelop vis-a-vis what happened at the old Cavalier, the Dakota area. All right, and my concern as a businessman and a resident of town, we can no longer in the business area, number one, encourage private wastewater treatment plants. We need to, because every time a businessman invests in that treatment plant, discourages him from wanting to support a sewer system. And environmentally, it's not good. We need to have a concentrated system.
I'm just thinking about a level playing field for the finances, that's all. There are a fair
Well,
number of businesses
The
in town
town, the town has to,
that
yeah.
are outside of your,
Well, the
Yeah.
town asked that question, and I don't, number one of the first things I was asked when I brought this up, I'm gonna be in conflict with the effort that all of you have been working so hard on. And I said, no, we're not gonna be in conflict. We're gonna only talk about a financing mechanism for only part of it, and I used the overlay in the opportunity zone. Now, since the opportunity law came into being, a lot of people have been coming to town hall, and town hall has been sending them to me on how they can take the money they need to invest and invest in my project. And so it's just a natural to mirror what the town's already doing and what it's already planned for. And I'm trying to complement everything that everyone's been working towards. And it's gonna be my job to try to encourage my neighbors and my co-business people. And so everyone knows, I've been offered to buy other properties and I have no interest. I've been blessed with my father's foresight to acquire 30 acres over the period of 58 years. and try to maintain it the best I can for family entertainment. And I have no interest in acquiring any other property as a business. I'm interested in my neighbors being able to protect their property and develop their property. I have my neighbors who use my property for parking, because they don't have enough space. They have trucks coming in that take care waste away regularly because they don't have enough land, and the whole bit. I don't have to tell you, you're studying it. We're trying to make it digestible, understandable, and complementary to your effort. And that's, but I asked the consultant, when I was asked by the town, can we expand the district? And he says, yes, later, but it's very important we make it concise and acceptable and digestible first. For instance, we brought the line down to Neptune, Packanacket to Red Jacket, not Seaview Avenue, because all the houses along Parkers River are under stress. And they can't replace that's all filled land. They can't replace their system. And we will not disrupt Seaview Avenue, for instance, with that district. And if the town later decides to expand the district down South Shore, all the way to the beach, to take care of that development, that's up to the town to expand. Mr. Davenport called and asked to see me, and he came in and wanted me to explain what I was trying to do, and I spent about an hour with him explaining the logic of the district. He was going to study it, but I have not heard a feedback as to his concerns or objections or support. But it'll be my job later with my team to reach out to him and other landowners to see if they'll be willing to invest in this district if town meeting passes the initial article. So it's very important we seek support for this, and that's why some people said, why don't you have 10 citizens sign the petition? And I said, no. Unless the selectmen vote on a positive nature and embrace this, it's not going to go.
Which they did.
Which they did unanimously. We explained it to them. And this is a prelude to what you're going to do in the spring. So at least we're going to have the subject somewhat of what you're discussing at this special town meeting. It can be a companion, it can be assistant, helping to educate our voters in this month. So I'm asking for your support. If there's any other questions I can answer for you, I'd be happy to, but it's that simple.
So when, can you clarify when the increase in assessed value triggers?
Yeah, so when the map is adopted, when the district is formed at the October meeting, that would be the point at which the baseline for the assessed values would be established.
Mhm.
But another part of the question might be, how does the increase get applied? How does it get decided what part of the increase gets applied? First of all, it's only redevelopment or increased assessed value that would be attributable to this development, and not just market forces or other.
No problem with that.
elements.
So when do you actually start paying more?
If you're a property owner and you commit to what you're going to do with the property, you would start paying when the debt service begins. It would all be a contractual process. So the system gets built, or the bond gets issued, and when payments need to start getting made on that, I would assume that would be.
So it would be a traditional assessed valuation. We're not talking about accelerating assessments.
That's correct.
Right. So you really have to, you got a plan, but it doesn't mean anything until you actually execute a plan.
But once you have a plan of having sewer, then we can begin the plan of a master plan and working with the town and seeing
I get it.
our properties
I'm
develop.
just checking to make sure there's no additional benefits.
No.
To previous question, you're earmarking the potential tax revenue growth to the town to pay for the infrastructure, as
That's
opposed to letting it flow into general revenues and then it goes where it goes.
Yeah, because the only
So
way you get it developed is if the sewer. So without the sewer, you won't get that property developed.
We get that. I'm just saying that you want the additional $90,000 in assessed revenue to be earmarked to pay for the sewer, as opposed to just going to the town coffers.
Correct.
That's the point of this, right? And in other districts and other towns or other states where they weren't contemplating a municipal or townwide system, this could act as the functioning financing mechanism to do a smaller sewer system or even a private sewer system, right?
Correct.
So if we were to completely fall down and not build anything, you could use this mechanism to go ahead and do something.
Exactly.
That's not an issue, though. I don't have that concern.
We don't want that on the
But-
table,
But
but if everything fails, you still have this as a last-ditch effort to get the
Sure.
town in the sewer
you
business.
basically commit yourselves to a project that's going to increase revenues, but you want the benefit to flow to paying for the infrastructure that helped create the benefit. I get it. But to your point, yeah, why not do the whole district at that point? Do the whole phase one. And for that matter, why not just do the whole town and go to the town meeting and say, well, you know what, any new revenues that the sewer is going to generate, because if anybody read the economic study, half the-
Limit of 25% of the time,
That's correct.
land.
Yeah, so the quick answer to that
so the
is
answer is a limitation.
that there's a limitation as
But-
what you can
Right,
designate.
right.
And the other limitation is, and I spoke to Louis Consultants.
But
about
aside
this,
from the limitation, the concept is we're using the increased tax revenues that would be generated from the infrastructure being available now. The benefit of that is phase one, basically a commercial district.
Right.
But the economic study says almost half of our economic development that will result from the sewer system is residential. And we're not capturing any of that upside to pay for the sewer. You could want to extend this to other districts
I
as
think
well.
there's another issue.
That's a different.
I think it's another issue from what you were raising. The real benefit of this has nothing to do with the tax incremental finance district. It has everything to do with the capital gains that those who are in the district have the benefit of.
That's the
And
opportunity
it's a
zone.
full capital gains depreciation, not depreciation, elimination. So and by the way, you get
You're
to,
talking about the opportunity zone now?
Yes.
yes.
Okay, yeah.
So
Right.
that's
Totally.
really what the benefit is there. And so if we define somebody inside the benefit, inside the district, they get the capital gains, but those on the outside will not.
They're two separate things, though.
Yeah, they're not creating the DIF district or not creating the DIF district doesn't change that federal program. The Opportunity Zone program exists. It was created by the federal government. And that's already been done. And the town of Yarmouth doesn't have anything to say about that one way or the other at this point.
Right.
But the town of Yarmouth designated this area as the opportunity zone and no other.
They nominated it and the governor's office forwarded it to the Fed and the Fed approved the districts that were created. This was one of them. There's one in Hyannis. And I think that's it on the Cape, is that correct?
And by the way, if I get to use, say for my property, for instance, and I had someone that had money to invest from the opportunity zone, I have to give up ownership. I can only retain 20% ownership. They have to have ownership. And that doesn't mean anybody in the district who has capital gains. I'd say if I took a census, maybe the Davenports could qualify. I don't know anybody else. I certainly couldn't qualify. I don't have capital gains money at the shelter. I'd have to be selling my property, part of it, to attract that money, and my family hasn't determined whether we do that yet, depending on the master plan and other developers. So there's a lot to it, and they haven't even passed all the regulations to determine the opportunity zone. I went to a workshop with Kathy and other town officials I was invited to attend, and I think Karen and Kyle went down to Washington to a seminar, and they haven't even developed all the regulations on the opportunity zone.
And we only
And
have
whether I
students
want to
with-
give up ownership of something that my family's had for 58 years and that I can't pass on to my grandchildren, I haven't made that decision yet. I'm only seeking to help create sewer in the town of Yarmouth that's going to benefit all of us, and me in particular, my family, if we can develop the property.
Question, you said the DIF is limited to 25% of the land mass of the town?
Yes. And so the other thing that goes with that is, so I did propose why doesn't the DIF just match phase one? It seems like that would make a lot of sense, right? And it's a simple answer, really, and Lou alluded to it. He's paying for this, so it's whatever he really wants it to be. I mean, he's investing into a certain area that he thinks he can generate results from. Because this vote in October doesn't really do anything other than give Lou an indication of support from the community that, given this area, he can solicit development agreements from people. And he's got, from those agreements, develop a plan. And it's got to be documented. The law requires it to be documented. And that plan has to indicate what you would build and how you pay for it. And he needs to have, well, it doesn't have to be in May, but the timeline is he needs to have that for May on this small area. If he expanded it, then he's incurring more costs on his nickel for perhaps a diminishing return. It's making it a bigger thing. But he needs to have a documented plan saying, here's what we would do, and here's how we pay for it, based on these development agreements.
Is there a time frame associated with this relative to redevelopment? And what impact does it have on veterans?
Yeah, well, that's the contractual agreements you alluded to, right? So if you're gonna go ahead and, whatever a project in the smaller air footprint might cost, you need to line up the development that's gonna pay for that.
Mhm.
And once you do, those people are on the hook, whether they redevelop. You can't change your mind later on and not redevelop, or if you choose not to redevelop, you're still on the hook for paying the cost.
Assuming that sewer is brought to their property.
Yeah, well, that's the
Right.
key, yeah.
Well, and so we hope what we're trying to do is complementary to your efforts and the town's efforts. And hope through this, we can help educate the townspeople. One of the biggest things we had, don't forget, in 2011, when they turned down this lateral line running from Barnstable east to Parkers River, is they didn't want to pay for it, and they wanted the users to pay for it.
So I just, to that point, and I have a couple thoughts here that
Go ahead.
will lay out for
Oh, please.
discussion purposes, but what Lou's proposing isn't anything we haven't talked about. And so when the selectman asked me what I thought about it, I said, yeah, I think it's great because we have a financing plan that pays for phase one that doesn't even rely on incremental tax revenues.
True.
So if you want to agree that Lou's plan is a good way to pay for it, well, then our plan's a good way to pay for it with the same sources as the backup to it all.
Right.
Because we can do, and you mentioned,
That's my point. We're in the
there's no
business,
magic
we're in the
to,
business of selling the financing plan for a sewer system.
Right.
And if you can go to who would otherwise fall on taxpayer, ratepayer and say, by the way, X amount of dollars will be coming from development agreements that we've identified.
then we can be specific.
Then
as
you
to-
can, if nothing else, you can test this economic study that's on
Right-
the table to
right
see
now-
if it's real or not, based
Right-
on what these guys are coming back with for development
Right
agreements.
now, we're saying we think it's very conservative, but we've said we've got $100 million of pent up demand on phase one that would be recognized within the 5 years of announcing that we're going to do something.
To that point, can we be a little bit more critical of that number? Because if you read the study, it says about half commercial and half residential. We don't even get to the residential side until phase 2, 3, or 4. Right? It's not all in phase one, the $100 million.
Be careful what we promise up front.
Okay. Now, if these guys are walking in the door with $50 million of development agreements just in their district, case taken, point proved, we'll move on. We don't even care about the residential increase, which, by the way, we probably shouldn't be in the business of doing anyways. Because up until a few years ago, the big crisis in town was we're developing too much. And now we're saying we're relying on residential development to pay for a sewer system.
Well, let me just make it even easier. I think it's easier. Maybe I'll confuse the point, but if you took the approach that Harwich took, or Chatham took, or other communities took, they paid for their wastewater programs 100% on the tax rate. Which is another way of
Hold on.
saying,
With or
We're getting-
without the federal grant.
well, after their, net.
After the government paid for
Right.
most of it.
In Chatham's case.
Right.
Well, in the case of Harwich.
But that's just another way of saying we're putting it on the tax rate and we expect the new growth coming from that to provide the revenues to subsidize it.
Whether it falls into the big pool of money, the general tax revenue, whether you earmark it for this, isn't that big a difference, to be honest. I don't think any public official would have a big problem with a diff. I just like.
Well, and there's a middle road too. Is the middle road being you didn't do a diff and didn't dedicate the money for it. We're pretty good here in town of carving it out ourselves, just as a matter of policy, and saying, okay, we've got this increase in revenue above our normal increase. That's what we're going to use for our debt service. you don't need a diff to tell you to do that, and that's,
We talked about that, actually.
Yeah, we did.
Does every property owner in the diff have to agree to be part of the diff?
No. That's a key.
So how do they get handled? Because they'll get a
Yeah.
benefit.
Benefit.
So they can just pay a benefit.
So if a developer decides that they're going to participate in the approach that, we walk in with and say, hey, if you'll commit to developing this, and we're gonna raise your taxes by an estimated amount, right? And they'll sign on the dotted line that they're gonna do that. And then we can go back to Rich and say, okay, so they've signed and they're ready to commit to a certain amount of annual revenue to the town. Then they're not going to be hit with a betterment later on because they've already made their commitment, right?
The other point I want to bring home, I've been, for the past 5 years since we passed the overlay, been not just in isolation looking at myself, I've been assessing my neighbors, talking with them along the strip. And one of the frustrations we've all had is we all worked hard to encourage development along 28 the proper way through this overlay effort, and nothing's happened. I'm hoping through this effort and through this district being created, that I can help encourage my neighbors to bite the bullet and make some good development choices with their property. It may not work, but it gives me another vehicle for them to bite the bullet. We've got a lot of absentee owners. Post office is one, Great Island is another. The property sitting idle. The town would like to see a plan, and its efforts have not been rewarded. I think one of the last consultants the town hired to do a market study of 28, it was suggested that we ought to reinforce our tourism industry. But they didn't think it ever would happen unless the town created a redevelopment authority to force development. Well, we're never gonna do that. So we have to have another vehicle. The town is restricted in approaching private property, but property owners are not. So at least it's gonna develop that dialogue between now and the spring to do a plan. And don't forget, we already have zoning in place. Not all of us have to must work with the town in its departments through the planning board, Board of Appeals, to come up with that master plan. So it's gonna be a hand in glove effort. And that's the way I see it. At the end, we may fail, but at least we'll give it an effort.
Can I ask, you don't have to answer the question. I don't want to put anybody on the spot.
I never mind the question as long as I don't have to give an answer.
Back in the legislature.
I think I remember that from 1982.
That's what.
You included the Red Jacket property in this district for now.
Well,
Is it going to be, it may end up in it, it may not end up in it.
I was hesitant to do that. I was gonna stay on 28. But the engineer we're using happens to live on Pockanocket. And brought to my attention the desperate need those properties have in having sewer.
No, I understand.
That's why we included it.
But somebody should correct me if I'm wrong. They received special development rights at some point a few years ago
We have
with
25
this
years.
property, right?
Yeah.
So the town has already created a extraordinary benefit for that property to be redeveloped, and it's yet to be redeveloped.
Yeah, they've also gave
Right,
Cod
so-
Commission, they're on the clock with the commission.
20 years.
Okay,
Uh,
we're just
Ask his
we're just stating
Right.
facts at
Yeah.
the moment.
11 years left.
So, but
How many
the
years?
town would have done that to receive eventually an economic benefit for doing so, and most likely in real estate tax revenues, which we are now going to, if it's in the district, instead earmark to paying for sewer, which would most likely make the project work where it might not have to work. That's why I say you may not want to answer the question because yes, it is costing the town something. It is costing the town something to include this property in this district. It's the future benefit we already agreed to receive in return for additional development benefits that they've already received. From
No, that's not true. When we first redid Route 28 zoning and made the hotel legal again, they wanted to be included, and we suggested, both the business community and the town, that we do 28 first, and then we do South Shore Drive second. And that was, they only got the same benefit the other hotels and motels go along 28. They went through a rigorous process of both town and Cape Cod Commission planning, and there's restrictions on whether they'll ever redevelop without some additional incentives. I don't see them getting any other benefit than any other property owner would get. We may see, and they went through the process to protect what they already got. So they're gonna be in the same boat as everybody else. They're gonna have to make a substantial commitment to develop.
From this point forward.
This point forward,
But it's the project they've already received approval for.
but that doesn't say they're ever gonna build it.
No, understood.
That's the point.
I'm just saying, we're taking revenues that the town had anticipated from that development and instead putting it in this pot for sewers.
And the town can determine how much of that they'll allocate, depending on their cost, and that's up to the town to do. But those decisions will come later, once I can ascertain whether they will invest. And as I said, Mr. Davenport asked to meet with me. I did meet with him. I gave him all the information with his people. As usual, he didn't respond or give me an answer. And his answer is his business. Whether he supports this or not, I don't know. But it'll be my job to go out with the people I've hired to ascertain for the town's benefit before another article comes to town meeting. So again, we're only creating the district.
Red Jacket is in phase one, right? As is all of South
Right
Shore.
now,
Yes.
Okay, just so we're not wasting our
South Shore
time.
Drive, by the way, wouldn't even be in phase one, would it?
Yeah,
Yes.
it
Yes,
is.
it
Oh,
is.
is South Shore Drive
That's why.
coming in from the east?
From Seaview.
No.
From Seaview.
Oh, from Seaview.
All the way from Bass River to the partnership.
Oh, okay. Again, that's the town's decision. We, for point of financing, is trying to confine ourselves to the efforts that I can achieve and I can afford to achieve. So we've restricted it to this point. Again, I wasn't gonna include Red Jacket, the engineer advised and the consultant I hired advised we do that. If I had my brothers, I'd stay on 28 and make my work a little easier. But I was advised otherwise, so I relented.
Thank you.
I want to thank you personally. I really think that your plan is a good idea, and it sparked a lot of interest. I think the Board of Selectmen are encouraged by that. It's something we've talked about in trying to pay for our system, at least on phase one, and that was to try and get powers that be to understand that maybe they should dedicate a certain amount, a certain percentage of the increase in revenues that they derive through future developments in helping to pay for the sewer. That was just another idea for funding this program. And I don't see the town going anywhere unless they, as far as future development, unless they build this system. And every entity that comes in and encourages this is a big help in trying to get, in allowing us to sell the program. So I appreciate you guys coming up with this.
And to your
Thank
point,
you.
in talking with Lou and Chris and a consultant, correct me if I'm wrong, but the preferred path is to just do the phase one as proposed. This is a backup,
Right.
to get something done if that were not to pass. And in addition, the work that Lou's gonna do is gonna demonstrate, the development agreements that potentially are out there and could be used to help finance our phase one. But the desire is to build the larger phase one. It's much more cost effective. And I think when Lou goes through his work, I think that'll prove that out as well too, because building a smaller district compared to what we're building with more users and spreading out the costs, I guess that remains to be seen. But
Well, I think there's a potential second or third level benefit beyond the diff itself, and that is to the extent that we can have liquidity going forward with phase one, building the trunk line and treatment plant. If we can do this without enduring financial pain to the town, I think that begets well for pushing phases 2, 3, et cetera, forward. You know, there's a little ditty I heard in other contexts that applies here. When it comes to cash, too much is enough. And to the extent that the town can do this project, you know, without, if you will, it's back to the wall, everybody's going to be better off. And then what I see the diff doing is, if you will, doing a little bit to accelerate cash collection, and, you know, carving out a little bit of the tax benefits that are coming from increased development, and to put that into the pool that's going to finance the project. So
The other thing nobody talks about either is the potential increases in other revenues that will be derived from this. You know, you think about the different fees and permits, and then you're gonna probably have increased rooms and meals tax revenue to the town, which could be substantial. Which then is money the town can do what they want with.
5-star branded hotel.
And I know there's another development in Lou's neighborhood being looked at. I don't want to say too much because it may or may not happen, but even if that, you know, goes forward, it could be a huge benefit to the area.
Yes, I want to point out, you know, the one element this does have to do with our work is potentially has an opportunity to kind of confuse the issue. And so that's something I got to work with Lou and his team on, just to make sure that we're all on the same page and doing a similar message, because it's not an either or, you know, and we still want to do the larger phase one, because the diff doesn't solve the problem we're trying to solve. It solves Lou's problem and his neighbor's problem.
Only if you bring the pipe down.
It doesn't solve our,
And that's why I started out my comments by saying, we want to compliment your work, we don't want to confuse it. And we want to not be the lead, which is why it was critical the selectmen sponsored this article and not business people or citizens sponsored. This is not my effort, this is the town's effort. That's why I'm coming before our committee. I think on Thursday, we're going before economic development, and just trying to educate and answer questions and alleviate any fears or doubts people have as to what we're trying to do. So I'm behind what you're doing. I support everything you're trying to do on our behalf, all of the citizens of town. So we just want to help. And this is one way we think financially it could help.
How and who determines what the increased values will be in a development?
That'll be town staff.
The town.
We'll coordinate with Rich.
So the assessors
The
office?
assessors
Assessing.
department, yeah.
traditional assessing.
Yeah, it'll be, this is all controlled by the town. All,
We're just doing legwork.
this is only,
Well, people will ask. I'm just trying to think of the questions they're gonna be.
see, once the town finally takes a town meeting action on this diff, it also gives us the opportunity to tell these people we've been talking with that the town's gonna go forward and be in the business of sewer, not us. This is the guy who should be in the business of sewer, not us. And as a former commissioner of public works in 1962 in the town of Natick, I understand the value of it. And I really thank you.
Probably one
for-
more thing, I think I've mentioned this to you before, Curtis, but it probably something worth saying out loud for everybody is that one of our neighbors is Weston Associates owns the Swan Pond Village development, the residential development there. They're under consent decree with DEP to have a new system. Their Title V system has officially failed. And they have another, I don't know what it is, 2 years or something to solve that problem. And so they've been forced to escrow some money to move forward with that. So Lou and I went up to Boston and met with them to discuss teaming up with them back when we were looking at this as a public-private partnership structure. And they said, yeah, we want to do that. You got to get the town to operate the facility. well, we're talking about doing this ourselves. Why do we have to have the town operate it? Because you might not be there anymore, and then that company that's supposed to be the operator fails, and then the system starts to spill all over the place, or it just doesn't take our effluent anymore. And what are we going to do? We need to guarantee that it's being handled by the public operating company, right? By the town. And so they have said to us, we're in once you have that. And so they declined to move forward with us until we had that. So that's very much a part of the whole discussion here is we need to incorporate the whole community into this, and we need the support of the town in order to make this all happen. And I dare say that I think it's a two-way street. I think, that obviously this committee and the selectmen and the town need the support of the landowners like Lou to make this work. So.
You know what they say, when you've made the sale, stop talking.
I said the night before.
We need to take a
For the
vote on this.
opportunity to come before you.
I think at some point we should vote to whether we recommend this. I would imagine that by the time we get to town meeting, somebody's gonna ask that question.
Well, let's digest it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lou.
Thank you, gentlemen.
So while we're on the topic, do we want to continue to motion to recommend and have a discussion or not? There's probably no other time than now, right? We don't really have, we have a
Well,
outreach, but we don't have another meeting between now and town meeting.
what's the chairman's thought? Are you talking about us discussing whether we're supporting a diff and then recommending to the selectmen?
Or to town meeting, whoever select,
Well,
whoever asks.
That should probably be a point of clarification. Do we have the authority or standing to go to town meeting and say the Water Resource Authority says this? Which, by the way, you'll have to
Well,
deliver.
From the viewpoint of somebody asking, what does the RAC think about this? I think we should have something to say. This is our subject, wastewater, or it's water quality, not just wastewater.
I don't know the answer. That's why I'm asking the question. I'm saying,
It may
as a
be confusing.
advisory committee, with no formal standing, this is kind of an ad hoc committee, right? It's not codified any place that we have standing. It's the selectmen put it together for this purpose. We're supposed to talk to them.
But I believe it's a permanent
And then-
committee. It's not like it's a temporary committee.
Again, I don't know the answer to that question. I didn't see it on the permanent committee's list. That's why.
I think there's some value in the committee taking a vote to support it and to inform the selectmen that we think.
I think we take it. I would recommend it myself. I think if the committee recommends it, it looks good for everybody.
I just
I
have
think
one,
if we just say nothing, people are gonna wonder why we didn't care enough to say something.
I just have one question in regards to the betterments that we talked about briefly. It's my understanding that if you're in the district, VIF,
Yeah.
you would be exempt from betterments if you chose to redevelopment and follow the program.
Because in lieu of the increased assessed valuations.
Right.
So you do escape
So you give
that
up,
mechanism.
you give up those betterments.
Well, we'd have to,
But your
it depends on the
committee-
nature of the development agreement. It's a contractual arrangement, so, probably, as I was thinking about it as they were talking,
Yeah, I wrote down to do it.
you're not gonna be able to do both. You can't hit them up twice for the same
No,
thing.
no.
But you'd hit them up for your betterment perhaps, which would then be offset by whatever revenue they've committed to your
Sure.
development agreement, and you're getting just the incremental
And
amount.
then if you were in this zone of property owner and you didn't decide not to go along with the TIF, then you'd be paying the.
Then you'd still have the town
Yeah.
And
betterment.
then if you redevelop your property, you're gonna pay the increased tax anyways.
So despite the answer to my question that the assessed valuation wouldn't increase unless there's an evaluation to assess, is that correct?
At what point do you make that?
Yeah, at what point do the assessed values go up once you
That's
sign
what
a
I
development
say.
agreement with the
Is there a
town?
timeframe?
Well, that's why you
Doesn't
need
go
to,
up until the facility's built, right?
Well, that would be my presumption, but once you've created, sorry, that's not my presumption. Once you've signed a development agreement with the town, your assessed value goes up because you can sell that development agreement.
Exactly.
There's a point
So-
in time when you're gonna pay that
So,
increased tax.
What I was
whether you do anything with the property or
thinking
not.
when they were talking was, oh, this is nice. They sign a development agreement with the town, we start getting some money flowing. They don't build a thing for 5 years. life's great, but which developer is crazy enough to give us increased taxes for 5 years without a development? That's why I asked the question. And his clarification was, well, it wouldn't kick in until we actually built it. That's why I said we should digest this before we just start jumping all over it. Plus, I'm not sure I get the red jacket piece to this. I thought there was a whole lot of angst and consternation at that development agreement we had with the Red Jacket a few years ago.
Yeah, but it included the other hotels too. Yeah.
Included all of them. I get it.
Exactly.
Right now, we're talking about
And
it
that was
being
what the commission was for.
this one property being in the district, right? Does that complicate matters if you have memory long enough that says, didn't we give those guys a deal
Right,
at that time?
hell of a deal.
So we could eventually
Yep.
recoup some of that in terms of tax revenues. And now we're taking that benefit and parking it over here in sewers.
Well, the other thing, we didn't get into, it's one of the finer points, but you don't need to allocate 100% of this incremental growth through the diff to wastewater. We get to pick the percentage. It's always got to fit in the financing of what you're building, but if 90% or 80% of the incremental values supports the payment,
And
then you can, town can elect to do
to
that.
the degree that we're heading to the same point come spring, where the town is voting to proceed with whichever, with the sewer treatment plant arrangement, centralized sewers. They're coming to town meeting as well to get a diff enabling article.
Hmm.
Doesn't one render the other one moot? In other words,
No.
if we're doing a sewer, what's the point of doing the diff?
The diff is a
I think it
layer
just-
on top.
It just defines how it's gonna get, it helps define how the sewers are gonna get paid for. That's how I look at it.
Yeah, it's an incremental, see it as an onion, and it's just one more layer on top to create, if you will, a special revenue stream for a special account.
Well, and we're also presuming that they're gonna do this market research on our behalf and give it to us and have this all together and present it in the form of a formal plan that indicates it can pay for itself by May. And that's not,
Well, what I'm trying
Given
to,
either,
what I'm
so-
trying to ascertain is, could they not just say, hey, we got a diff, let's move ahead. We're not waiting for these guys on the sewer.
They could. The reality is, I don't think they can move any faster than we are. We have engineering information already they don't have, that they would have to start with or get it from our people, whatever it may be. So that's been my concern right along, is I'm not sure why anybody thinks, and I do know why, because how many times have we talked about this issue over the past century? And here we are again, right? So there's no faith that this town is actually gonna get this thing finished. So this is his backup plan. If the
Right.
town falls
That's a
apart again, he has his diff, and he creates a funding source to put in his own mini system. I call it a mini system.
Package fund.
Pretty well.
That's what he had originally.
Yeah.
With the water park.
He's basically gonna have the same thing we're gonna have, just in a smaller version.
Yeah.
Really, it's-
But on the other hand, if this is presented properly to the public and they understand it, don't you think that this is going to be like an added incentive? I mean, if the public perceives that we're getting more revenue here and we're, encouraging development, and some of that revenue is going to be help pay for the sewer. It's not going on the tax rate.
It's proof of concept. It's very valuable. What we're trying to ascertain is if he's can go to Plan B directly.
Yeah.
And leave us sort of sitting there going,
Is our expert?
Well, I guess-
has something to say.
Hi, Stephanie Cox. So just where I see this kind of going a little bit sideways, and some of you have brought it up, is the confusion that would arise between the public of the way that the financing model you already have in place for phase one, and this is potentially being a backup. I would just encourage you to look at what they're doing as a way to pay for phases 2, 3, 4, so that it's in addition to, it's not an either or it's not a backup, because I think, I attended the informational meeting that you all had at the Realtors Association. The first question from a member of the public was, what's going on here? Are we going to have, are we going to end up getting, have to pay a lot of money later on down the line? And I think that the willingness of folks to pay for phases 2 through 8 is going to be dependent on how much the town is showing that it's doing to offset the residential burden. So that if it funds from this, I'd say it should be more than 50% go into a wastewater fund. I think 100% should go into a wastewater fund to pay for future development of future phases. That way you're sending a really strong message to the voters at town meeting that you're doing everything you can to take the burden off them, not just for phase 1, but for phases 2 through 8.
I think the key is going to be phase 1. How the perception from residents in regards to the cost for phase 1.
If you set aside the diff for a second and say, we as a planning entity suggest all additional tax revenues resulting from new development due to the sewer system be earmarked for paying for the sewer system, you don't need to call it a diff. It doesn't even have to be a diff. We just recommend that that's our funding mechanism.
Yep.
Can you enforce that? I don't know what
Set up a stabilization account.
what Lee just said. Right. I mean, we basically putting,
You do it all the
Some-
time with through our annual budget process.
there you go. So we're putting some I call them boxes in place with the WIF and the development fund to park this money in. We just need to make the agreement or
It's called
state that we're going to take
enterprise
new revenues
Yep.
resulting from development that was resulted from the sewer system was going into one of those pots.
So it gets real tough here because you get into the sausage making, and there's a lot of angles, but just think about it. If we have a balanced plan as it is, let's say, and now we add this, which wasn't in our balanced plan, as additional funding, and you're saying you could use that for phases, subsequent phases, and maybe you could, but part of that balanced plan included betterments to the same property owners.
Right.
But in any event, this new revenue, because it's related to the bonds used to pay, that you're incurring to pay for the construction of this, so you can't defer it. So you basically are foregoing some other thing that you've already developed to balance it out. You're going to use something else to balance it out, which means some of those other things drop off, which might make them available for future, maybe, is a perspective.
I think the other.
But again, my point of view would be, this is just an incremental step, right? So if phase 1 got approved as it's being proposed, and you had these development agreements, that would just be a reduction of what our betterment and our funding plan already calls for. So in other words, if you are a big water user and you're going to get a $400,000 betterment, but through this development agreement, the incremental taxes turn out to be $200,000. Well, your betterment's $400,000 less what you've committed in the development agreement, and therefore you're getting assessed for the $200,000. But the plan's still the same plan. So kind of how I see this going is you start with, and maybe I have the order wrong, but first of all, presuming that they have everything together to have a plan in place that actually works, which is also a little bit presumptuous, by May.
Right.
And that's not a given, but let's assume that they can get a plan together that is financed and balances by May. And if you have that, then you have a sequence of questions in my mind.
Yeah.
Do you want to join DHY? Perhaps that's first.
Yeah.
Yes or no? If you don't, do you want to build phase 1 on the Yarmouth only model? Oh, you don't want to do that? Number 3, do you want to do anything? And you can do it through this diff, right? But perhaps you say no to DHY, but yes to Yarmouth, in which case the third question still is applicable as a financing mechanism. Or if you said no, it's still applicable as a way of getting something done, lose backup plan, basically.
Yeah, that's why I couched my question earlier as, regardless of what the centralized sewer system looks like, this is a conversation to have on how you generate and assign valuations or revenues to paying for it. Didn't matter if the money is going to the Dennis plant or the Yarmouth plant, it's money coming into the pot to pay for something. But then again, most of our expense in phase 1 is in the ground, it's not the plant.
See, look at the time frame for phase 1. And how does that coincide with this diff relative to?
They're the same. And, originally I talked to these guys and I said, well, wouldn't you just rather have us do our phase one? And they're like, yeah, of course, but except that it's too far in the future. I'm like, well, it's 5 years. It's operational by 2025.
They're not gonna do
I
any
asked
better.
them how quick they could do
They're not
it.
gonna do any
And
better.
they said 18 months. I'm like,
Yeah.
so you've gone from the
What he
Cape
wants-
Cod
what he
Commission,
wants is this thing.
you've talked to
The
Mass
development
DOT,
agreements.
you've done your engineering, you've
That's
done
what
your
he wants. He doesn't
design,
want to pay the betterment.
and the answer is they've
No,
done
no,
none
so,
of
but the
it.
development agreement is
Yeah.
it goes with the development, with the
Sure.
property, it's
Yeah.
now
But you know,
accessible.
what I think the difference is between, because you talked about South Shore Drive and Blue Water and Red Jacket and whatever. And we did a lot of work because we thought it was actually gonna get used.
So we did.
Sounds to me like if we do this, he's making a commitment that he will do it because he's gonna sign an agreement that says at some point in the near future, he's gonna pay an increased tax rate. So he's gonna want to increase his revenue to cover that increase, that's gonna come to his tax bill every year.
Yeah, I think that he will get, my own opinion is that he will get all the permits in place until.
Whatever, as long as
Which he has the right to
as
do.
long as somebody does it.
Exactly.
That's my point. As long as somebody
But to
does
your
the
point, is
development.
why wouldn't you wait 5 years? Because he doesn't want to wait 5 years. He can market it as a development waiting to
Oh, I
happen,
understand.
as
now.
opposed to, who knows what's gonna happen if the sewer's coming.
Once he markets it, what do you think is gonna happen? You think somebody's gonna come in within a year or 2 years and take it over?
I don't want to be presumptuous. I don't know the answer to the question. I just think that if he has the ability, because there's a different place to go get a development agreement,
Right.
now he's got a different piece of real estate to sell than if you're just waiting on a sewer to come.
Exactly.
Well, it's one of the questions the selectmen had. What's, in lieu of a wastewater treatment plant and collection system, what can we do to support our property owners?
Yeah.
Because they're all clamoring for it. And the answer is commit to a plan and have a timeline that everybody can, because then exactly what Spiro just said could happen. They can market their properties knowing that in 5 years, that's going to be in place and that has a value.
Yeah, no, I get the question all the time for property owners over 20, when's the sewer coming? Because that's going to allow me to do A, B, or C. If you say 2025, they cringe a little bit, but they think maybe they can hold on. If it's after that, don't talk to me. I mean, I'm not going to be here. Who knows what's going to happen?
But to answer your question, Tom, their ability to implement this is at best the same timeline that we
Yeah,
have.
that was my point.
It sounds to me like the selectmen are already committed to this.
They voted for it.
No, they do this a lot on all articles. They agreed to put it on the warrant. That's
That's
pretty
what
much
they
all they
did,
did.
yeah.
And it says they're going to recommend from the floor, if they recommend from the floor. Same thing with the finance committee. They may have no
You have
recommendation.
another copy of this?
And by the way, a lot of times they let the argument fly before they recommend. And the town meeting is going this way, they'll recommend that way. If they go this way, they're going to
Thank you.
recommend that way. I think this is going to stand or fall on its own merits. I don't think whether the selectmen support it or not, it's going to make a difference. There's they have to do a lot of homework in the community themselves.
And it also sounds like this is the concept vote in October, and in May is when it really gets important as to whether he's actually gonna do it
Yeah,
and what it's going to
I
be.
mean, deciding on the district, this is all this article does at the
Right.
moment. That's why I was curious, does he want to stick with this district or does he want to refine it? Because it has different perception in the community.
Well,
Whether you
it
include
may be reduced in size too, based on the abutters.
Well, this
I
has,
get his limitation. I mean, he wants to perceive this as a compact district.
Yeah.
But if you think about it, you can extend it all the way past the water park,
well, this
right? But we're not.
procedurally, we're doing this in 2 steps. All this step 1 does is it doesn't even establish the district, the diff. It just defines what it might look like. So he has the ability to go out to property owners and sell something and say, we got some support to develop this, there's something there. But you don't need to do the 2-step process. You could do a 1-step process. If you had all your ducks in a row and you had the reports required and the plans required under the legislation indicating that it was feasible, you could do this all in one fell swoop at one vote.
Yeah.
So like I say, it's a little presumptuous to assume that we're coming back in May on this, because you might find that he can't get all his cost estimates lined up. And if he has the cost estimates lined up, he can't get all the development agreements executed. Or, to your point, maybe through working with the town, he realizes that, and if the town pays for the extra effort, that the should change. And you can come back at your second meeting
Yeah.
and approve something totally different.
But to be fair, he has to walk in with a plan.
Right, exactly.
It might not be this plan, but at town meeting, he has to walk in with a plan. That's what the article says.
Exactly.
Now, since it says dated September 12th, I assume it's this plan.
Right. But we could always amend.
Okay, amended plan. No, he will have to define a plan. It's not simply getting a conceptual approval for doing it differently. I don't want it to, Stephanie was right. You can't go to town meeting with too many variables because you get too many opponents.
It's going to
You have
confuse
to-
the daylights out.
you have to
of the-
narrow
out of
this
the
down.
public.
If you want to do, I don't know the order of the articles, but this being number 9 is pretty high up. Where's the sewer? I mean, where's the,
Well, this is for
This is
October.
for October. We're not even on that.
We're in the
Right.
spring.
I mean, we have nothing before town meeting.
No,
But you're raising a point.
But
that
this
I
will be the
think
first
is-
thing that's
I
in front of
think-
town
I
meeting.
think it's crucial, though, and you were touching on it, and that is the sequential presentation. Because,
Yeah.
you have to make people understand that this is a building block concept, and if you're for A, that pretty soon B's coming up, and you're gonna want to be for B, and if you did A and B, you're gonna want to be for C. You can't bring C in first. You've got to be able to, because a fair number of people come to town meeting who don't know very much about any of the issues. They come to town meeting like they go to the movies, it's an educational
It's a single
process.
issue.
What are they gonna talk about? I'll decide on the right then and there whether I'm gonna vote for something.
They're single issue people too, come for one issue and then
That's
they
true.
stay for everything
You
else.
get the whole,
and you go.
you get the whole spectrum, but you need all the votes. And so, how it gets rolled out at town meeting, I think it's very important. And the diff, is important to some people, but it's clearly down the line. I mean, it has to be seen as an add-on late in the game. We did all these good things, and by the way, we can do something else if it gets that far.
I guess I jumped ahead. We really don't have any business in front of town meeting at this point. So wouldn't it be appropriate to actually ask for time at town meeting to do something?
I thought we were going to, a presentation or
I
something.
mean, you can't make it a half-hour presentation and draw the whole thing
Because this
out.
will tie in with all the community meetings
Yeah, I
that
think-
we've been having.
I think and that was why part of number 2 here. But I think we need to, as part of our events, one of our events is coming up as town meeting, and as part of this article that's being presented, we ought to get with Lou, and we ought to have a piece, somebody, of explaining our overall plan and how Lou's concept fits into that.
you keep it short and sweet.
I think we're getting sucked into Lou's project when we should be over here talking about the town's project. I mean, standalone 10-minute presentation, 15 presentation, whatever the selectman and moderator agree to be appropriate to have a town meeting, because it's not an article, right? We're not going to ask for discussion. It's not going to be any Q&A. It's just a presentation, because here we got 300-400 of you, if we're lucky, to get the ball rolling here, because we're coming back in May with a really big article. Think they'll let us do that?
It's up to the moderator.
So we've had presentations before by fire departments or school committees or whatever was before the before the town meeting as informational.
Yeah, I think the public would expect that, really.
I agree.
Let's just come back to the issue at hand here. If we had to vote on this tonight, I would vote.
We don't have to.
But
Nobody made a motion, so
I'm just saying,
it's just there.
I would vote against because I don't understand. But right now, you said more money in essentially saying that we're really not getting more money, and that's what I don't see. This doesn't provide any more revenue. The incremental tax valuation that would arise is going to be there whether he does anything or not. So I don't get it.
That's not true, though.
Well, that's what I need to have
If he
explained.
doesn't develop his property, there's no incremental tax revenue.
True.
Well, we're arguing that there will be development.
He still has the
simply because
benefit.
it made the cost of operation of any piece of property a hell of a lot cheaper. So maybe he's getting somebody to say, I will do it in year 1 or year 2, but we're arguing that if we give you this benefit, the cost of operating a hotel or a business will just be less and people will come. Not because they have any weird tax gimmick to get them in. I'm more concerned, and this is the part where I got to capital gains, they dismissed that. But my understanding is there is a capital gain, so long as they hold the property for 10 years. And then they get complete capital gain.
Right.
And I believe they get a step up on basis day one. So I've just looked at the IRS regs on this, and I'm not a tax lawyer. But my concern is that, we're very heavily dependent in this town on revenue from the state and from the federal government, and it's declining. Why is that the case? Because we've been chipping away at the revenue sources in this country. One of them is capital gains taxation. Well, I won't get into the various ways that have gone down, but if this is merely to give a capital gains benefit to the people who live inside the district, not to the people who live outside the district, then that's an advantage to those people, certainly, and we would be encouraging that. But for the town, there's no loss of revenue, but to the state and the federal government, there is. And indirectly, for us, there's a loss of revenue because we depend upon both the feds and the state for many of the grant resources. For example, our borrowing program that we're looking at here.
See, I think it's a
They're
little
two
different
separate issues.
perspective. Yeah, a little different perspective. If your property goes up 40% in value over a period of years, whether you're in or you're out of the DIF, you're still going to be subject to capital gains. It's yes or no, depending on your fitting in the Internal Revenue Code. I'm not a tax lawyer either, but I think where the DIF has marketability, and this is why I think the sequential presentation is very important. If the public understands we have a wastewater problem, if the public understands we have a drinking water problem, if the public understands bad things will happen if we don't build a sewer, people will say, yeah, that's right, I want to be for that. And so we lay out a plan and we say, okay, here's the solution. We could do it ourselves, but we've got a better idea. We'll get together with 2 other towns, and we've got this tri-town proposal on the table. And, we've given this great thought over a long period of time, and this is the plan. And we get people to say, okay, they vote for that. Then we say, in addition to the plan we just voted for, we can enhance it a little bit. And the way we enhance it is we take some percentage of the business community, which has come forward on its own. And if those folks in the business community add value to their property, let's say whatever the numbers, it's a 10 that goes to a $20 million property, the increase in the real estate valuation, whatever that number works out to, that money is going to be put into we'll call it the sewer kitty for conversation. And that shows people who own commercial property in town that they're really serious about this project, and that helps everybody else in town because there's some dedicated money. Money's fungible, goes into the pot. It's more toothpaste in the tube, and we can have a little money over here to do something. I mean, my personal goal is to get this project off the ground because it's been DOA for too many years, and the Yarmouth is really hurting because it doesn't have it. And then B, to get the project not only underway, but to do it with liquidity. I don't like, where you're under intense pressure for the last nickel in anything. That's always a tough way to do business, whether it's your personal finance, the business finance, or the town finance. And so to the extent that we can use the DIF, which I didn't know word one about until I heard the first presentation of the Board of Selectmen a month ago. And I said, well, that's kind of creative. It doesn't take away from anything. It just takes some of.
It's just designated.
Money we don't now have.
It's going to be there anyways.
Kind of
So
sets it aside.
we're all agreeing on the mechanism as it was described. Can we also agree that it's revenue neutral
To the town.
to the town? Right. So whatever other issue you want to stand on is in addition to those 2 baselines, if you will, right? I'm not a big fan of going to town meeting and saying anything at this point on the DIF because we haven't said anything on the overall project. And to the degree there'll be an opportunity for everybody to do that again later, I don't see where it's our role to sell the diff. They can just keep doing it. November, December, January, February, March, they can do public meetings. We can even offer them the umbrella to do public meetings on the diff if they want to do public education. We barely do our own public education on the overall project before we have to jump in and say something about a component of it, a potential component of it going forward.
My concern is that the diff is approved and time goes by and nothing happens. The projection tonight was a branded hotel, multi-unit apartment buildings, is what I heard from Lou
I'm
relative.
talking about after the second phase of approvals.
Yeah.
Come September, they get something.
So if you're looking at this type of situation relative to, again, a branded hotel, multi-unit apartment buildings, which I'm not sure would fly anyway, out of that 22 acres, there's only 12 acres of buildable. But the bottom line is, if it's stagnant and he can't get partners to come in or investors, what have you, what impact does that have on the town? Well, if we're progressing with phase one, that means that those folks don't pay betterments. And what kind of betterments do you think you'd have with a branded hotel and multi-unit apartment building?
I would continue to see clarification. We're one group of non-elected officials. I'm sure there's some people who are really responsible for the answer to the question.
Absolutely.
I don't know if that scenario is correct, and you can have a development agreement, but not development revenues flowing from it, then you're right. Just kind of shot yourself in the foot for no reason. That's why I prefer not to be held accountable for the diff at all.
Well, I would, again, just to caution you all, it's all a bit presumptuous. We're assuming this is all going to work, and I don't think that's necessarily a safe assumption, but that's part of Lou's due diligence. I don't know what it's going to cost to build a treatment plant and a collection system in this smaller area. But let's say it's $20 million over 30 years, not at subsidized interest, at 3 or 4%, 5% maybe.
Absolutely.
So what's the debt service on that? It's probably over $1.5 million, $2 million a year.
Sure.
So we're going to get enough incremental tax revenue in this small space? Are we going to have a viable plan? And I don't know the answer right now. Nobody does. That's what Lou's asking for the opportunity to do. I think you ought to wait and see what he comes up with for a plan.
Yeah. No,
I mean,
I agree.
everything's just conjecture up to that point.
Exactly. No, I agree.
All right, why don't we just get unstuck off this because we're going nowhere and move on.
Okay.
Sound like an idea?
Well, the one thing that may have come out of this conversation is, do you anticipate requesting time at town meeting? We'll do it as chair, as officially, and then you guys
I
mind.
can ask I'll ask Dan tomorrow, and we'll talk to the moderator.
It's the moderator's meeting, so it's up to him.
Right, agreed, but you gotta sort of ask
Feel him out
permission.
and see what he thinks about it.
And with that, there's probably a table outside.
So
that goes with
that's
that.
kind of number 2. We've got our public information session, which I think the census I've heard is that similar to the last couple. Then maybe we'll revisit our presentation in the winter and spring, depending on what happens in the next couple months. We've got our update on the 22nd to the selectmen, and then we've got the 29th potentially as another opportunity to do some discussion. Anything else? I guess the only other thing would be on the 18th, if you're interested in coming, it would be at Dennis Town Hall, the DHY working group with Harwich, Dennis, and Yarmouth. So that's what's on the horizon.
That will be Friday morning, maybe at 9 o'clock.
What time is those? What time are those?
9 o'clock.
9 o'clock.
AM? Obviously.
And then in between, and I don't know the answer yet, but I'm working with Dave Young. And he's kind of running the interference between the 3 towns, but based on the selectmen's questions, seems pretty clear that there needs to be a face-to-face with those 3 communities, board, the selectmen. And so something will probably be established at some point, whether it happens before the 29th or the end of October, I'm not sure. But if, based on my prior information to you, if we're trying to take a vote in January and December 17th is the last date to, get them information before that vote, there needs to be at least one, if not two, 3 town board of selectmen meetings to iron out these last issues that have come up.
Yeah.
Or if they, if everybody drops their issue and agrees that what we got is what
I
we'll
think
go.
there's enough concerns and questions to go around. I've spoken to selectmen in all 3 boards, and they all have different issues
Right.
with the
I would
partnership agreement.
Right.
And they're not the same issues. So to get them addressed,
Kinda
they
need to put
need
everybody
to
in.
sit down in a room. I don't think it's all selectmen. I don't think you need 15 people in a room. I think you probably need 2 or 3 from each town to carry the ball for that town, and then go back to their selectmen and say, okay, our concern is being addressed thusly, and then the others would do the same, and then you eventually can come to consensus.
Unfortunately, 15 is minimum.
But at the same time, you should probably understand there's people on each board, the selectmen on each board, that would eventually not support a tri-town agreement. So this is not a let's work out the details and get married. It's we may not get married.
What's the best we can do?
We'll build 2 houses at the end of the
Really,
day
I
instead of
realize
one.
that.
I mean, I don't think we're talking out of school and saying Harwich really doesn't have a choice because they're not going to build a plant on their own. That's not going to happen. So the best they can do is tap into the Dennis plant, whether it's a 3-town plant or a 2-town plant. And that's kind of the issues they're wrestling with. And some of them have issues with, do we really want Yarmouth in the partnership? And the other ones are thinking, how can we do without Yarmouth in the partnership? That kind. So in your Yarmouth going, we ask the same question. Do we want to be in or do we not? So if they're not meeting, that's 10 selectmen, give or take. I
So
don't know
that's
how they're going
the-
to hash this out.
So that's, I'm going to push Dave to get those things set up. Not that you'd necessarily have to go to those, but when they occur, if they occur, I'll let you know so we can keep you up to date. The other piece of that is, as you might recall, the selectmen mentioned some concerns about, how did we estimate flow projections? How did we estimate costs? And that's what Dave's memo was designed to address, as well as the upcoming presentation. But in addition to that, Charlie Seelig works with the, Sumner, works with the town of Harwich, doing his wastewater outreach. So I've talked with him, and he's willing through Weston and Sampson, and I've talked to CDM about it, and I've talked to Weston and Sampson folks about it. Kind of almost as like a peer review type of thing, although they're not going to do in-depth analysis, but they're going to, provide some, if they agree, some level of, can't think of the word, support, confidence that the approach was sound, and there's going to be some amount level. It's not going to be, like I said earlier, you're not going to know all the answers, but you do the best estimates you can do, and there needs to be a leap of faith. But they'll be able to provide a third party perspective that was a sound process.
I don't. I think the selectmen are grappling with this for legitimate reasons. There's no predispositions on anybody's part. There truly is not a correct answer. There's not one correct answer to go forward. And whether you take Tri-Town Road or the single town road, we're going to get to a centralized sewer system, collection system. It's the conversation really is about where the costs fall and who do they fall on and how soon do they fall on us, on those constituents. And that's what they should be grappling with legitimately as an issue to be decided by a board of selectmen. Flows and cost per, incremental flows are not really in their purview. That's what the staff and administration is about. How we use municipal lands, however, is. So when they say, well, we can't dump it all on the golf course, because that not only will disrupt the golf course, but we're dumping it on the golf course, is a legitimate question to ask. That we might want to be helpful in terms of answering questions. But I didn't mean to sound so dismissive on the previous question. We've hashed out the board issue. That's been done. You set up a system where you have no way one town can run roughshod over the others. That's the point of the board. You need at least 2 towns to agree, whether it's Dennis and Harwich, or Yarmouth and somebody else. If anybody served on either finance committee or a school committee that has more than 2 towns in it, or I should say the school committee had more than 2 towns in it. I was on the finance committee that had to oversee them. When you have bad setups like the NASA school system and you're the town of Brewster, you'll get screwed every year because the other 3 towns will vote for whatever they want and you got to pay the bill, even though you're the biggest town.
Sounds familiar.
We don't necessarily want to be in that position, and the board setup prevents. I mean, it doesn't prevent it, but it gives us enough leeway so we don't get screwed like that. However, there may still be concern that those 2 towns vote to impose a plan that is has financial repercussions to Yarmouth. That's where the question comes from. But you're not going to come up with a better board. I don't think there's no way you can come up with a better.
And this is one of the fine
Construction.
points of the agreement, and that's what Dave needs to speak to. But capital expansion isn't just, I don't think, a majority vote. It's probably one of those things that requires a 2/3 or a super majority.
If you read the details, somebody put a lot of thought and effort into those details. How many people have to be at a meeting at all times? How many people have to be at a vote at all
That's
times?
There's be
How
representation
the
from
capital-
every, yeah.
How the
Rich and I
capital,
have sat in all,
Right.
and
so,
Jeff, in all these meetings.
so whether it's Norm or
Yeah.
somebody else who needs to focus on that, they'll get over the hump once they read it. I don't think he was in a position.
But the selectmen have all been given a draft. And I think most of us who participate in DHY would agree that about the only change anybody foresees right now is a change in a word that somebody doesn't like. I think substantively, what's there is not going to change. It's all been agreed on by everybody.
Right.
That's what it looks like to me. So trying to get the 3 boards of selectmen to sit down together in a quiet way and just, okay, ask your question, Dave, Kara, whoever, let's get them answered.
Yeah.
And it's, you can walk out of the room not liking it, but here's the answer, you can take it or leave it. Because there's too much of this, I don't know. And people do know, they're just not listening.
I think to the value of you guys being on the panel, the next time the selectmen meet, is to knock some of those questions out,
Absolutely.
right? I mean, the bringing the Barnstable wastewater over here to put on Buck Island is just a complete red herring. Somebody should be able to just knock it back and say, we're not, as the town of Yarmouth, we're not going to allow the town of Barnstable to flush their toilets on Buck Island Road. It isn't going to happen. So don't get sidetracked by thinking that's going to happen at whatever price, because they got stuck for 15 minutes talking about what the economic value of Buck Island property was if we farm it out to Barnstable. Can we stay focused on the project?
Half of the Buck Island property is underwater. So, you
Well,
see,
regardless-
you hear that a parcel is X number of acres and you go, ooh, right?
Yeah, all I'm saying
Okay,
is,
how much of it is upland? Then it
then
changes
again,
the whole
there's the detail.
thing, right?
That's the level of detail I'm sort of speaking to, which is get out of the weeds,
Yeah.
get back up to where you're supposed to be as the governing body on this discussion. And you would necessarily be those people who bring them back to the big question. Whether it's 11 acres or no acres or whatnot. We're not talking about the Buck Island property. We're talking about a partnership at this point, or going it alone. There are these costs and these costs, these inherent risks and these inherent risks. You guys have to decide for the rest of us how we go forward. Once you decide the direction you want to go, we'll go back and address the details.
I think the.
That's why I didn't want to be on this panel, because if I stood up there and said that in plain English, you guys would probably kick me off the board.
We don't have that choice.
No. We said we wouldn't do that.
Yeah, it's time to stop trying to slow things down. Let's get going. And I don't mean just people in this room. I'm talking about others who seem to just continue to run interference. I don't know how many times their questions have been answered. They just come up and ask it again, or they ask it a different way.
I never assume malfeasance. I think in their heart, they probably just don't have enough information to ask the right questions a lot of times. And that's not because you didn't give it to them. It's because they didn't take it in and look at it and see exactly what it is that was in front of them. And you can only do so much. I would never want to be a selectman, the number of hours you put in.
I'd rather be a selectman.
Unbelievable.
They put in way less hours than I do.
Well,
I guarantee
in
it.
this instance, you got to put in a few more if you're going to get
Talk
through this
about
issue.
speaking from experience. Huh?
And speaking from experience, yeah.
So Kurt, the one thing we're kind of touched on it a little bit. Number 5C here is really the only one that I want to make sure we have some direction on. The other two are recommendations the board's made, which aren't really sensitive time-wise at the moment. But did the board want to do anything further on DHY, or, you don't need to do it tonight, but I'm thinking of planning forward that before the selectmen make a decision in January, perhaps you might want to tighten up your recommendation or be more specific as to it.
I think it's appropriate once these presentations at the selectmen's meetings,
Sure.
maybe to refine. Our recommendation was proceed with looking at the DHY agreement, as opposed to don't proceed, looking at the DHY.
Yeah.
If at the future date after we've got,
Having ample time to work it out.
then it becomes definitely go this way, then they probably want to hear that. They probably need it.
I think the other thing we need to pay attention to is the CPC funding shift to wastewater. And I think some actions have been taken that some people probably would regret that they did right now, but they're there, and now other people being dragged into it.
Mhm.
And you got letters flying all over the place about why we can't take the money from CPC. Why
It's an all-out marketing campaign.
Yeah, and it might,
Can we go back a step? If it doesn't, does it need to be reauthorized first next year?
no,
No.
it can be, we can get out of it, but I think it's unless we decide to get out of it, it's just there.
Now, you need a vote to change something. 2020 is the first year that you're allowed to change. You don't have to change. It just stays as is.
So it just continues as it is. So we don't they don't actually have to reaffirm it. So it would be proactive to change it.
But I think one of the biggest arguments that I'm hearing is that
So,
CPC generates so much money in other grants, other money, blah, blah, blah. My take on it is if we take that, let's say 1.5% now, put it towards this effort, and Rich has come up with numbers that growth would have replaced it anyways, but if we get some new growth and we have our own money, we can still use that as seed money that will attract other grants and funding sources. So that doesn't matter.
Didn't we decide not to get into the pissing contest? And we just recommended a straight percentage of revenue coming into the wastewater bucket. Whatever happens to CPC is somebody else's problem. That's our recommendation last month, and we walked out of it, or 2 months ago.
No, I just take it on a personal level, pay attention to it, that's all. Because it's out there and there's things going on.
In other words, we didn't trigger the CPC committee's response.
No, the
Nothing we
response-
did.
No, I
There's-
understand.
Yeah.
But the end result is, it's the most practical thing to do, to split the 3.5% each entity.
Well, if you want to maintain that level of taxation.
Exactly.
Right.
Which is when the selectmen's
Which is why-
thing.
Look, I'm going to say it because I said last
But
time.
what they're proposing is adding another percent on top of the 3 to make it 4 and then split to 2, right? That's one of the
That's one of
other.
the
I'm
ideas
just
out
doing what
there,
my
yes.
kid says. I don't care where you got the money. Can I please have $20? And that's all we're saying. I mean, we need $1 million
Keep in mind-
a year.
If you split it 1.5% for RAC and CPC, and then you look at all the capital projects coming forward, we talked about this before. Look at all these capital projects. What is it, 130 million in that general area?
Are you just generally saying we're screwed?
So no, the point is, all that's going to go on your tax rate. Which in turn will trickle down to both RAC and CPC.
The CPC is not a logical, analytical question. It's completely emotional, has nothing to do with
No kidding.
reality.
I serve on that
We
committee.
like doing our housing, we like doing our preservation, we like doing our recreation. Don't bother me. Well,
We're
the house is on
helping-
fire and we need the hose to go over here to put out the fire.
we're-
Don't matter. I want to build this playground. That's just the way it is.
We've got, I think, 12.
You want to fight that battle at town
applications
meeting?
issued.
That's what's gonna happen though. It's
We're not
coming.
gonna-
I just want to let you know.
The selectmen want to fight that battle because they want to, keep a hard line on increasing tax revenues. That's where it belongs. Finance committee. What can we do to get a finance committee to actually engage in that kind of argument?
Yeah, but I just know that the different factions that make up the CPC are rallying their troops and they're sending out letters with facts or opinions, you can, however you look at it. And
RAC is the bad
Somebody's gonna have to
guy.
address it.
RAC is the bad guy. And that's the perception.
Right.
They're
It's
not
the selectmen.
considering that RAC
us,
is a
right?
duly appointed committee to serve the town, serve all of the
We didn't-
residents.
That's why we didn't step on their toes. We didn't step on anybody's toes. We identified a need of $1 million a year to move this project to liquidity. And it turns out to be 1.5% of the tax base. How do you guys want to fund it? I didn't say you had to do it through CPC. You can just tax plastic bottles and do it instead. Instead of banning them, we should be taxing them.
So
Which is an interesting point, because the state doesn't. Take a look at all these water bottles. If it's not carbonated,
saying
if it's not carbonated.
It's a crime against
There's
humanity.
there's
to
no,
put
there's no
water,
tax
free
on it.
water in a plastic bottle and charge $1. I don't understand it at all. It's just one of those things that boggles the mind.
All right,
Put it in
well,
your own container.
that's just information, do what you want with it.
I guess the only thing I'd say with that on 5B here with the WIF would be, the point's well taken, Spiro, but my sense of it is there's an opportunity. If we can show a little bit of leadership, then maybe we get everybody on board
That's
and you
exactly what's
approach
gonna
town
happen.
meeting on a unified front with a suggestion that everybody can live with, as opposed to carving it out and every man for themselves, trying to get what they can get, which I don't think, in that way, I think nobody gets anything. It's my perspective on it.
I hate to see one article come up against the other.
Right.
And in doing so, we lose both articles. So keep that in mind. You have a logical argument relative to the 3% split, 1.5 per entity. They're both town projects. But quite frankly, we don't have the applications. We're marketing, we're trying to get applications in to the CPC committee. When I first got on, it was 24, 26. Last year, we approved 6 or 7. This year, we get 12, and out of that 12, probably 4 or 5 aren't gonna even stand a chance. One of them is the Playhouse in Dennis.
I mean, after 20 years, we haven't run out of projects. They
It's the
just
same
keep-
people
they just
coming
keep
back
up with new
every
ones.
year. Same people coming
That's
back.
what happened at the county with their grant program. The same people kept coming back for the same subsidy.
That's
Eventually,
why
they
it's
just cut
so
it all off
long
and said,
for
we're
the
not doing this
taxpayer.
anymore.
Really. It's not fair to the taxpayer when we've got this big load to carry.
Yeah.
Okay,
So what else do we need, Rich?
Chairman, you go.
Before you adjourn,
Yes?
I probably should have brought this up a few minutes ago. My name is Joseph Manning. I listened to everybody, and I probably should have brought this up, as I said, when you guys were concluding the discussion about Article 9. Is it my understanding that this committee's not going to recommend to the selectmen Mr. Niconella's plan?
We're not gonna not recommend.
You're going to take no position?
So that sounds like what the committee wants to do.
Okay. Are you concerned at all with how that might negatively impact what he's gonna try to do in the next 6 months? If he's gonna go and speak to all the people that would be in this particular zone that he's identified, and they say to him that the RAC hasn't taken a position, sounds to me like this is another red herring.
Well, town meeting would have taken a position.
Well, obviously,
community.
the selectmen's gonna take a position, and the finance committee's gonna take a position, but you don't think it would be helpful to get a real sense of what?
Well, typically those committees are in a town meeting warrant. The reason those show up as a recommending board is because they're statutory boards.
They're the
Yeah, no, I'm not
Permanent
saying make a
boards.
recommendation to town meeting for that particular day. I'm saying making a recommendation to the selectmen on, you're not gonna meet again before the 22nd, right?
No.
So at that time, you're gonna be making the final recommendation before the vote on the 29th, right?
Well, they would be.
Right.
Well, actually, they're not presenting it either.
Helpful.
I mean, this is not town-sponsored article.
Right.
It's just a citizen's petition, for lack of a better explanation, that he managed to get the selectmen to put on.
So in terms of giving the selectmen cover, though, I'm thinking about it in terms of the whole picture.
I got one.
When a selectman gets questioned about whether or not the RAC, where does the RAC stand on this? The
Well,
RAC's chosen to take no position.
Is this for the publication?
No,
Okay.
No.
If anybody actually knows what the RAC is, I would be surprised. But as
Well,
far as the
people in
selectmen are
business community
concerned,
that he's gonna be
right, as far as the
approaching to try to
selectmen
get
are
into the
concerned,
room.
they should take interest in whether we chimed in or not. And since we're not at a consensus point on it, but we should say to the selectmen, we're not saying anything. So
I think.
But he's offering to do you a free study, right? I mean, basically, he's gonna do it on his own dime.
he made his case. I
So
never
why
heard the
would you
word.
wanna support, I mean, you can always change your mind before the spring, right? You can always. do
Yeah,
anything.
there'll be much more, there should be a lot more information
I
by
would think he'd
spring.
be, I don't know, it just seems to me like it's odd that he wouldn't take, this is what you've been charged with. Well, wouldn't it be just as easy to support? What's the downside?
More information, but I have reservations about it. I talked about the betterments and what impact that would be.
But isn't he gonna illuminate what his plan is in between now and then and probably answer all of your reservations, all of your questions at that point?
There's a possibility that he may, sure. And at that point in time, maybe the committee will consider it. But we still have, I have reservations about it.
Yeah, no.
Basically,
I'm not
it's a
completely
good
sold
plan.
either. I'm just thinking about him going out to try to sell this plan and the question that he's gonna logically get back. And then you guys relying on what he gets as results when it might be tainted by a lack of support of this committee.
I wouldn't worry about that at all. I think
You're
any citizen,
interpreting something I think that isn't there.
any citizen who creates a petition has to go out and market themselves. They typically don't even go to selectmen and say, please support this before I decide to do anything else. I don't fault him for asking for a town and premature before he goes to town meeting, but most folks who come up
She's
with,
right.
we didn't create the diff proposal, we didn't incorporate it into the overall sewer plan. We're not taking it to town meeting. I don't see where we have to do anything.
I characterize it, speaking for myself, that right now, there's one person in Iraq, I like the dip, and if it was on the table, I'd probably vote for it, but I see the greater good. I think the collective wisdom, if I'm just picking this out of thin air, is that Iraq, we are very interested in winning the war. We don't want to jeopardize the chance of one battle distracting the public attention. Our agenda is to get, if you will, sometime in the next year, $100+ million bond issue through town government. We need the citizens behind us. We don't want to confuse them. If we don't get that, the diff doesn't matter. We need to have a focus like a laser. Yarmouth is in trouble. Yarmouth needs to build a sewer system. Yarmouth needs to do it now. We've been in procrastination mode for decades. There's a lot of public support for this. And
Yeah,
think
I was almost on the same page, thinking that
if it's appropriately, marketed, go forward with all the various elements we've been talking about for over a year in this group, some people for years and years. And so Mr. Nicanello ought to see everything we're doing is supportive of him. There's nothing to go out of this room with thinking that there's something negative towards what he has in mind. The greater good is what's prevailing here. We just need to keep the train on the track. Focus.
I absolutely appreciate that. I think that the messaging around this has to be clear, because I've lived in this town my whole life, and 2011 was the opportunity. It was lost.
Well, we can't undo yesterday. We gotta pick
I
up the
think
ball
that-
and run with it.
To your point, a way to use Mr. Nicanello to get what you want done is to say, look, we're gonna put it on the business community now. They're gonna be part and parcel with us. It's not gonna be the ratepayers and the homeowners that are gonna have to pay for all this.
That's why,
Let's use Mr. Nicanello.
that's why it didn't pass in 2011. Everything was on the backs of the residential property.
Right, no, I know.
And there were no betterments, which meant that from Hyannis line to the Dennis line, at 5.3 miles, no one was contributing who was really going to benefit from it. Phase one, the sewer.
Sure.
So that's what killed it.
All right,
I think-
we've kind of made our point, our stance, and that's where it is. I personally agree with you. I'd like to take a vote on it. If somebody does not want to, I can't make them. So that's where we're at.
I appreciate it.
Anything else, Rich?
Do you want to vote minutes? Take one vote?
Can we get through that?
It's like wait and do them in aggregate 3 months from now.
Would you like- I don't say anything. Has anybody read them?
I read them. I don't have a problem with them, but it's up to you guys if
I
you want.
read them too.
If you want to spend any time on it.
Approve this as read.
Second,
Second.
any comments, corrections? All those in favor?
I,
Who's taking minutes today?
Secretary, Assistant Town Administrator.
how many jobs do you have?
No,
How many
I
titles?
mean, I'm wondering if the burden should necessarily fall on you or not, but I thought.
Jeff's, I'm gonna get my notes to someone that Jeff has, so.
Okay.
Put it together.
Democratic Town Committee wants to do another presentation on the 19th of October. It's kind of short.
Who does?
Democratic Town Committee.
Oh, 10/19?
So think about it. Let me know how that fits in.
And as far as a future meeting, Mr. Chairman, I'll line up the first Monday of November, see what that looks like. If that doesn't seem to fit, I'll let you know.
Okay. Yeah, maybe have a conversation, I don't know, it probably should have been done tonight downstairs. It would be nice to have CEDC and it's not meeting at the same time, because there are a lot of people that have to choose between which meeting they have to go.
You're on at 4 o'clock on Mondays? We can always start later.
Or maybe pick another Monday, I don't know.
Pick the second Monday, whatever you guys want.
Whatever works with the committee, it doesn't really matter to me, but if anybody's got a conflict, I think we need to figure that out, or CED being a smaller, CEDC being a smaller group, maybe
They should change
they're more
theirs.
flexible. Well, I'm just saying, maybe it's easy to get 5 people to change, than it is to get 8 people to change the meeting time, that's all. Just a thought, I'd like to see if we can look into that, because I do get,
We could just start attending theirs. To Lou's point, we can ask them why we have 3 failed Chinese restaurants in town. 3 failed Chinese restaurant properties.
One that's half taken down.
It's
Yeah,
extraordinary. To
28.
think a
they put
town
a
this
fence around it
size,
today.
a town this size with these
Oh, do
demographics
they?
cannot support a Chinese restaurant. And one of them's adjacent to the trailer park. Seriously? What is wrong with this sort of strip?
2 of them have been poorly managed, that's why they're
Well, we
not
know.
with us anymore.
You can't expect all restaurants to succeed, but I'm just saying
That's why they're not
when,
here.
when a restaurant fails in this town, it's staying vacant.
Yeah, because I do try to attend when I can to CEDC to hear what they're doing too, so. Again, I would like us to
That
stop,
was kind of a dig. Why don't they work on stuff like that?
there's a lot of those questions out there. All right, so we pretty well covered everything for today?
Make a motion to adjourn.
So move.
All in favor? Thank you all.
Tom, can I claim that?